Hey guys, tonight we're unlocking a door that hasn't creaked open in centuries. You're not standing in a place you recognize. The walls here are older than your country, older than your language. They're lined with whispers, shadows, and secrets the earth didn't mean to reveal just yet. The air smells faintly of dust, warm stone, and the pages of a library no one remembers how to enter. Beneath your feet, a floor tiled with questions. Above your head, stars that have watched civilizations rise and vanish without leaving so much as a name. You haven't taken more than 3 steps into this quiet corridor of time before something strange happens, a feeling not fear exactly, but the hum of something ancient, like you've stepped into a chapter of the human story that was torn out, burned, or perhaps never written down in the first place. Tonight, you're not here for bedtime facts or sleepy trivia. You're here to float through the mysteries history refuses to explain. Structures carved with impossible precision long before anyone invented math. Tombs with technology buried beside the dead. Symbols no one can read, and timelines that just don't work. We'll travel through jungles, deserts, ocean floors, and sealed crypts, guided only by the most tantalizing question of all. What if we've forgotten more than we've ever known? And here's the strange part. You probably won't survive this world if it were real. The gravity's off. The clocks don't tick in order. One wrong hallway, and you'd find yourself 3,000 years off schedule. You'd be trading obsidian for bananas with people who don't technically exist. But for tonight, you're safe. You're not exploring with boots or shovels, just with your ears, your breath, and that curious corner of your mind that still believes in lost doors and dusty keys. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? What time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your journey in a world that was lost before it was ever truly found. Atlantis. The very name feels heavy with myth, like it was dipped in gold and sunk in a sea of dreams. You probably heard about it as a kid, a grand underwater city filled with wisdom, wonder, and technology that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. But tonight, we're not here for cartoons or conspiracy. We're gliding past the surface and drifting quietly down into the oldest account we have, Plato's words. It was around 360 BCE when Plato, the Greek philosopher, wrote about Atlantis. Not in a storybook, but in a pair of dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. He claimed it had been a mighty naval empire positioned beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis, he said, had flourished 9,000 years before his own time. That would put it somewhere around 11,600 years ago. A strange number. One that, as we'll see, aligns eerily well with the end of the last ice age. According to Plato, Atlantis was vast and wealthy, ruled by kings, descended from the god Poseidon. Its capital had concentric rings of land and sea, perfectly engineered, almost too perfect. Its temples gleamed with precious metals. Its people were powerful, but eventually corrupted. And then, one terrible day, the gods struck it down. The earth shook, the sea swallowed it, and just like that, it vanished. Historians have argued ever since, was Plato telling an allegory or quoting something older? Some believe he was passing down memories of the Minoans, whose island empire was shattered by a volcanic eruption on Santorini. Others point to the Sea Peoples or the sudden collapse of the Bronze Age, but none of those fully match the timeline or grandeur of Plato's description. And Plato insisted, this is not fiction. Now here's where things get weird. In the early 20th century, an American congressman and mystic named Ignatius Donnelly revived interest in Atlantis with his wildly popular book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. He argued that this lost land was not only real, but but had seeded every great ancient civilization from Egypt to the Maya. While mainstream scholars scoffed, the idea struck a chord with the public. Atlantis became a catch-all for everything unexplainable. Still, despite endless speculation, no universally accepted site has ever been found, which hasn't stopped anyone from looking. People have claimed Atlantis was in the Caribbean, the Sahara Desert, the Black Sea, Antarctica, even under Antarctica. But one location keeps rising back to the surface, the Rishat structure, or Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania. Viewed from above, it's an enormous natural circular formation nearly matching Plato's description of Atlantis's capital. Multiple concentric rings, a central island. Even the scale is comparable. So, could it be? Well, here's the friction. Geologists argue the Risha is just a natural uplift and erosion pattern, nothing more. But others note that the area shows signs of ancient habitation tool use and possible canal-like structures. No city, but maybe a memory. And here's the kicker: the Rishat is situated at an elevation not under the sea. Which brings us to a quiet question. What if Atlantis was never under the sea at all? What if it was erased by something else? Desertification, perhaps? Or war, or time itself? You pause here. It's not just about lost land or cities anymore. Atlantis represents something bigger, a kind of cultural amnesia, an ache in our collective memory. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: we keep finding things we can't explain. Ruins where there shouldn't be ruins. Artifacts that don't fit. Civilizations that vanished without clear cause. And the more we look back, the more fragile our timelines feel. Let's linger on one last point before we move on, because it may not help you sleep, but it might help you dream. The date Plato gave for Atlantis's destruction, roughly 11,600 years ago, isn't just random. That's almost exactly when a mysterious climate event known as the Younger Dryas ended. It marked the close of a sudden mini-ice age and the beginning of our current interglacial period. In some theories, especially those shared by alternative researchers like Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson, this wasn't just a natural shift, it may have been a cataclysm. A comet impact perhaps, a flood, a reset button for civilization. The story of Atlantis might not be one place, but a memory of many layered, echoed, and retold across oceans and continents by people who survived something massive. Something we've forgotten how to remember. So, now as your eyes grow heavier and your breath softens with each passing second, imagine that city not in ruins, not sunken, but just out of reach, floating between myth and history. A place where the streets glowed with a strange metal, the air smelled like cedar, and everyone remembered who they were. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes there, but that's okay. Tonight you don't have to. You awaken, not suddenly, but as if you'd been drifting underwater and slowly float to the surface. Around you, the world is older than memory, older than farming, older than fire in the hearth. Before cities, before kings, before anything we would call history, there was Göbekli Tepe. At first glance, it doesn't look like much, just a scattering of weather-worn stones in a dusty Turkish hillside. But the moment you step into the site quietly, carefully, because the stones feel alive, you realize something extraordinary. These aren't just random rocks. They're monoliths arranged in massive stone circles, some over 20 feet tall, carved, smoothed, engraved with animals that haven't roamed this area in thousands of years. And then it hits you: this was built 6,000 years before the pyramids. Let that settle for a second. Göbekli Tepe is over 11,000 years old. That's twice the age of Stonehenge. It predates agriculture, writing, pottery, and the wheel. There were no cities when this was built, no farms, no kings or taxes or scrolls. Just hunter-gatherers supposedly roaming the earth in small nomadic bands. So then, why? You walk through the dust, your fingers hovering near the carvings. Lions, boars, vultures, serpents, each etched with an uncanny smoothness. These were not crude doodles. They were symbolic, intentional. Some researchers believe they tell stories. Others suggest they served ritual purposes. Still others point to astronomical alignments in the stone circles. But here's the strangest part. No one lived here. There are no houses at Göbekli Tepe, no trash piles, no hearths, no burial pits. It wasn't a village. It was something else. A gathering site. A temple. Maybe even the first temple, built not by priests, but by people we assumed were too primitive to worship at all. You start to feel something deeper here, an unsettling reversal. All our textbooks tell us that people settled down first, then built religion. But Göbekli Tepe hints at the opposite, that belief may have come first. That shared myth, shared ceremony brought humans together before crops did. That the urge to worship something greater was stronger than the hunger for wheat or barley. It's hard not to think of the modern world in this moment, of how we still gather around shared stories, shared symbols. And maybe, just maybe, we've been doing that since before we even knew what civilization meant. And then another oddity. As you loop around the site, you find out something even more bizarre. Göbekli Tepe was buried. On purpose. Sometime around 8000 BCE, the builders filled it in, stone by stone deliberately, like closing a chapter, or hiding it from someone, or everyone. Why would anyone do that? Historians still argue. Some say it was a sacred act returning it to the earth. Others think it was to preserve something too powerful or painful to leave exposed. A few fringe voices even whisper of coming catastrophes. Solar flares, floods, extinction-level events, and claim the people of Göbekli Tepe knew what was coming. The truth we don't know, but the burial preserved it better than any museum ever could. It's why we can see it now, why those animals still prowl silently across the stones, their meanings just out of reach. You crouch by one particular pillar. It's shaped like a capital T common here, and you notice arms' fingers draped along its sides. It's a stylized human form, not a statue, a symbol, a presence, a guardian, a deity. The ancestor of all monuments. The T-shaped pillars face inward toward the center of each ring, as if watching, listening, waiting. And here's where it gets even more haunting. New discoveries around Göbekli Tepe at nearby Karahan Tepe, Sefer Tepe, and other sibling sites suggest this was not a one-off. There may have been a whole network of ceremonial centers built by people who walked hundreds of miles coordinated construction and shared a purpose we can no longer read. That realization settles on your chest like dust. This wasn't just one temple. It was part of a forgotten spiritual geography, a blueprint etched not on maps, but in memory, in ritual, in stone. And still, no one agrees on who these builders were. Their bones tell us they were lean, strong, mobile. Their tools were made of flint and obsidian, not bronze or iron. Yet they moved stones weighing up to 20 tons. With what leverage? Ropes music. You hear that too faintly in the dark part of your mind. A low hum, a gathering of hands, a rhythm older than language. Here's a final image to carry with you as the night deepens. At Göbekli Tepe, there are carvings not just of animals, but of headless men, of scorpions circling human forms, of abstract symbols whose meaning we lost before we ever found them. Was this a holy site? A warning? A message? Or just the first page of a book we never finished reading? As the stars settle gently overhead, and the wind blows across a landscape that once echoed with forgotten footsteps, you feel something stir. Not fear, not awe, just curiosity. The kind that makes you keep listening, keep asking, keep wondering if maybe, just maybe, humanity isn't a straight line but a loop, a circle of stone, a temple in the dust, a dream buried not to be forgotten, but to be found when we're finally ready to understand. Tonight, you came close, and the road is just beginning. You don't need a flashlight here. The symbols shine in your mind like starlight. silent, compact, stubborn. You run your hand along a slab etched with delicate strokes lines and loops that don't quite form words, but feel like they should. This is not a dream. This is the Indus Valley script, the writing system no one has ever read. We begin in a place called Mohenjo-Daro Mound of the Dead. But there's nothing particularly grim here. Just mystery. Low, wide platforms of dusty brick organized like a modern city, grids of streets, drainage systems, multi-story homes, public baths. Civilization in the 3rd millennium BCE, nearly 5,000 years ago. The Indus Valley was one of the world's great early cultures contemporary with Mesopotamia and Egypt, and in some ways far more advanced. And yet we barely know what to call them. Why? Because we can't read what they wrote. You pause before a small palm-sized artifact, a stamp seal carved in steatite used for trade or identification. At its center is an animal, maybe a unicorn or a bull. Above it, an inscription, maybe 5 or 6 characters. They're tiny, almost elegant. Some look like plants, others like horns, fish forks, or tridents. Each one repeated on hundreds of other seals, but never in a way that gives up their secret. The Indus script, as we call it now, appears on seals, pottery, jewelry, and tools. Short phrases, rarely more than 5 symbols, never more than 20. It seems to be a writing system, but not in any language we know. No Rosetta Stone, no bilingual tablets, just rows and rows of undeciphered signs frozen in clay. Historians still argue, is it really a script, or just a set of symbolic marks? Some linguists argue that the brevity of the inscriptions suggests it isn't full writing. Others counter that early Chinese, Sumerian, and Egyptian scripts began with short logograms too. And there's another more sobering reason: we may have lost the entire spoken language that once gave these marks life. You sit with that for a moment. Imagine an entire people, an entire worldview, locked inside a language we no longer even have the key to pronounce. It's like trying to hum a song you've never heard. And yet, the clues are everywhere. The Indus Valley civilization spanned modern-day Pakistan and northwest India. It had over 1,000 known settlements. It exported goods to Mesopotamia. Its people designed earthquake-resistant homes. They practiced dentistry, had working toilets. And here's the truly odd part: showed almost no evidence of war. No grand monuments to kings. No mass graves from battles. Just tidy urban planning, standard brick sizes, and quiet dignity. What kind of civilization does that? Most early empires shouted their names across the desert in colossal statues and temple walls. But the Indus folk whispered. If they even had kings, we haven't found their palaces. If they made laws, we haven't read them. If they wrote poems, they were on material that didn't last. And if they prayed their gods, if any, remained faceless and unnamed. You might expect that such a people would leave behind a massive religious monument, a grand statue, a warrior's tale. But what we find instead are tiny seals, modest tools, and bathhouses. Clean water, clean lines, clean exits. And yet there is mystery. Beneath the order, hints of something we're still missing. One of the most famous artifacts is the Pashupati seal. It shows a horned figure seated in a yogic pose surrounded by animals. Some believe it's the earliest image of Shiva, the Hindu god of transformation. But the style is distinct, far older than Hinduism. Is it a prototype deity? A mythic figure? A shaman? We don't know. And that not knowing has made the Indus Valley a favorite haunt for theories, some wild, some grounded. One fringe claim is that the Indus people were actually part of a forgotten global culture connected to Sumer Egypt, even Mesoamerica. Evidence: similar motifs, shared myth patterns, obscure linguistic overlaps. Of course, mainstream scholars reject these ideas, pointing to trade rather than a lost super-civilization. Still, when every city you find from this culture looks strangely modern, strangely efficient, strangely silent, you start to wonder, Why did they fall? That's the other question. Around 1900 BCE, the Indus cities begin to empty. No clear signs of fire or invasion, just a slow decline. Some say climate change shifted the monsoon patterns. Others suggest rivers, especially the mighty Sarasvati, dried up. Still others suspect a breakdown in trade or a disease we'll never trace. Whatever the cause, the cities were abandoned. And soon after, so was their writing. Just gone. Tonight, as you listen, there's a kind of hush around this story. It's not loud like Atlantis. It doesn't come with rumors of aliens or sunken treasure. It comes like the flicker of a candle behind a curtain. A reminder that not all mysteries roar. Some just refuse to speak. And that silence is what haunts you. Because even though we have their bricks, their tools, their bones, and their cities, we do not have their voice. That might be the most haunting thing of all. You close your eyes imagining what the script might sound like, whether it was harsh and guttural or soft and rhythmic, whether it echoed in stone temples or floated through incense smoke at dusk, whether a child once scratched their name in it, and whether anyone ever read it. Tonight, you're the one doing the listening, and in that quiet, you realize something profound. Every mystery has two stories, the one we tell and the one that's never been told. And here in the shadow of vanished streets and undeciphered glyphs, you're beginning to hear both. You're not walking anymore. You're pushing vines aside. The air is humid, thick with 1,000 green scents, some sweet, some sour, some so ancient they carry memories you don't recognize. Beneath your feet, the path isn't made of stone, but roots and moss. Your boots sink into damp soil. Something stirs in the canopy above you, a bird, a monkey, or just the jungle whispering. This is the Amazon. And somewhere ahead, hidden beneath centuries of leaf and legend, might be the lost city of Z. It sounds like something out of a pulp novel. And in a way, it is. But the story begins with a real man, Percy Fawcett, a British explorer who vanished in 1925 while searching for a lost civilization deep in Brazil. He called it Z and described it as a city of great stone buildings, organized society, and possibly even pyramids. Most people thought he'd gone mad. After all, the Amazon was supposed to be untamed wilderness, home to tribal peoples, yes, but not advanced civilizations. Fawcett disagreed. He had read Portuguese records from the 16th century, describing massive cities along the Amazon River glowing at night. He believed those tales. He followed them. And then, he disappeared. You pause in the shade imagining that last expedition, Fawcett, his son, and one other man pushing deeper and deeper into forest no map could chart. No one knows what happened to them. Some think they were killed by hostile tribes. Others believe they died of disease starvation or the river itself. But here's where the story takes a twist. For decades, Z was dismissed as fantasy. The academic world laughed at Fawcett's theories. No one took the idea of a complex Amazonian civilization seriously. And then came LiDAR. LiDAR is a technology that uses laser pulses to see beneath jungle canopy, mapping the earth below in stunning detail. And when researchers started scanning regions of the Amazon, with it, something astonishing appeared. Grids, roads, mounds, circles, cities. Suddenly, Fawcett didn't sound so crazy. In 2018, scientists published a study showing more than 80 large settlements across southwestern Amazonia. These were not villages. They had structured layouts, ceremonial centers, defensive earthworks. The scale suggested tens of thousands of people once lived in places the jungle has completely swallowed. And these sites, many were aligned with astronomical patterns. That's right. These weren't random huts in the trees. They were engineered spaces, cultures with cosmologies, calendars, possibly writing. And then, silence. What happened to them? There are theories. Some say the civilizations collapsed before European contact. Others argue they were wiped out by diseases brought by early explorers, smallpox, and measles, racing ahead of the conquistadors, killing 90% of the population before they were even seen. The jungle grew back fast. Trees covered roads. Vines pulled down temples. Within a few generations, stone cities became fairy tales. But the oral traditions survived. Many indigenous tribes still speak of ancestral towns, sky gods, underground tunnels, and golden artifacts. Archaeologists once waved these stories off as metaphor. Now, they're starting to listen. You rest beside a massive tree, its roots curl like the fingers of something ancient. Insects chirp. A butterfly floats past. And somewhere, a satellite orbits silently scanning the ground below. LiDAR has given us eyes again, and yet Z remains elusive. Some say Fawcett City hasn't been found because he was looking in the wrong place. Others suggest Z wasn't a single location, but a memory, an echo of many interconnected societies forming a lost Amazonian network, like a jungle version of the Silk Road. Quiet, green, hidden, but not imaginary. And here's a strange detail to carry with you, Terra Preta. It means black earth. It's a kind of ultra-rich human-made soil found across huge stretches of the Amazon. This stuff is centuries old and still fertile today. Indigenous peoples created it by layering charcoal bone and compost into the ground. It transformed poor acidic jungle soil into farmland that could feed large populations. This isn't just smart farming, it's a signature, a clue. Because wherever we find Terra Preta, we're finding ruins too. So maybe Z isn't one lost city, but a code name for a whole forgotten way of life. One that didn't rely on stone temples or towering monuments, but on harmony with the land, on astronomy and agriculture, on networks and knowledge. A civilization that was quiet by design. And that's what makes it so easy to miss and so easy to dismiss. Because we often think advanced means skyscrapers and armies. But maybe in the depths of the rainforest, advanced meant sustainable. Maybe their greatness wasn't measured in gold or war, but in the fact that they vanished without scars. Tonight, as you drift further into the quiet green unknown, imagine Fawcett not as a madman, but as a man just slightly ahead of his time. Someone who trusted old stories, who believed the jungle could whisper truths the textbooks hadn't caught up with. You wouldn't last long in the rainforest. Few people would. But for a moment, right here wrapped in vines and stars, you're part of something bigger. You're hearing the old songs again, the ones made of stone shadow and roots. And you wonder, if we had listened sooner, would the city have answered? You step into sunlight now, dry, warm, golden. The jungle behind you fades, and under your feet, the earth turns to stone again. But this is not Rome, not Greece, not even Egypt. This is the forgotten edge of Europe, southern Spain to be exact, where a whisper of myth has hung in the air for over 2,000 years. They called it Tartessos, and just like that, you're back inside a mystery. If you've never heard of Tartessos, don't feel bad. Most people haven't. It's not a name shouted across history books. It doesn't star in museum exhibits. But in its time around the 9th to 6th centuries, BCE, it was legendary. The Greek poet Anacreon wrote about its wealth. Herodotus claimed its kings were fabulously rich and generous, especially one named Arganthonios, who supposedly reigned for 80 years. The Greeks traded with Tartessos. So did the Phoenicians. It was known as a land of silver and tin, overflowing with resources, horses, and harmony. And then, nothing. The city, or maybe a whole region, just vanishes from the historical record. No ruins with the name Tartessos on them. No tombs marked clearly. Just absence. And in that void, myth took root. Some thought it was Atlantis under a new name. Others called it a lost Celtic stronghold. Some even suggested it was a Phoenician colony that simply burned and was buried by time. But here's where it gets interesting. In the last few decades, archaeologists have unearthed sites in Andalusia that suggest Tartessos may have been very real, just not the kind of civilization we expected. One of the most fascinating discoveries is the Guadalquivir Valley, an area filled with bronze and early Iron Age settlements. Excavations there have revealed palatial buildings, elaborate pottery artwork depicting warriors and animals, and clear signs of long-distance trade. More intriguingly, researchers uncovered a set of 5 carved human faces in 2023. Stylized regal wearing diadems, unlike anything typical for Iberian prehistory. Some believe these faces represent Tartessian nobility, perhaps even the mysterious Arganthonios himself. And yet, no writing, no direct evidence, no city walls with nameplates. It's like we're staring at a puzzle where the corner pieces are missing. Historians still argue whether Tartessos was a real unified kingdom, a trading confederation, or even a cultural fusion zone where Phoenician knowledge met Iberian land, producing something uniquely hybrid and short-lived. But the truth is, the deeper we dig, the stranger it becomes. For instance, some sites near the Doñana marshes, southwest Spain, show ancient harbor remains, stone anchor points, and even submerged roads. Some speculate these may have been part of Tartessos, or at least related to it. Others believe the marsh was once a tidal bay, and what's now flat and muddy was once bustling with ships and trade. It raises an eerie possibility. What if Tartessos didn't vanish entirely? What if it simply sank? Yes, the Atlantis parallel surfaces again. Because remember, Plato described Atlantis as a great port city beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar. And that fits Spain's southern coast. Some even think Plato might have been borrowing from the Tartessos legend passed down and distorted through Greek traders. So you're left with a haunting idea. Tartessos might be 2 mysteries at once, a real place that vanished too neatly, and a myth that grew too large to verify. You look out across the landscape. Dry grass waves like the sea. The mountains in the distance wear shadows like cloaks. Somewhere beneath this quiet, someone built something important. Traded gold, forged alliances, told stories we no longer understand. And the silence they left behind is loud, louder than any monument. You picture Arganthonios, the long-lived king. Was he real? Was he a poetic metaphor for a dynasty? An exaggeration, or simply a name plucked from the wreckage of history? Even his age, 80 years of rule, isn't entirely absurd. Modern historians know that symbolic reign lengths were often used to signal power, divine favor, or cultural memory. In a world without paper, repetition was how you engraved a name into time. And yet his kingdom faded anyway. Tonight, as your breathing slows and the light of the Spanish sun dims into an imagined dusk, you're not chasing treasure or lost cities. You're chasing what people believed. That somewhere there was a place of fairness and trade, a place where sailors came from all over the known world to barter and feast. Tartessos might have been small or mighty. We might be standing on it right now unaware. But the most powerful part, someone remembered it for centuries after it was gone. And that's the real legacy. Because sometimes the most mysterious cities aren't the ones that leave behind temples. They're the ones that leave behind questions. And tonight, as you close your eyes, one last whisper from the coast catches in the wind. You can bury a kingdom, but you can't bury a story. You descend into shadow again. This time, not because of fading light, but because something much larger looms overhead. Stone, wall after wall of it, not in ruin, but in precision, immovable, mathematical, almost arrogant. You're standing at the entrance of a legend carved into the sands of Egypt, not the pyramids you're thinking of, not the ones on postcards or coffee mugs. No, this is the lost Labyrinth of Egypt. You've probably never walked through its corridors in a dream. That's okay. Most haven't. It was described long ago by Herodotus, the father of history, who visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE and left behind one of the most mysterious travel reviews in human memory. He said this, "I found it to surpass even the pyramids. It has 12 covered courts. The walls are covered with carvings, and every courtyard is made of white marble and is surrounded by a colonnade. The roof is made of stone, and the whole building is surrounded by a wall. 12 courts, 3,000 rooms, chambers above ground and chambers below. A labyrinth so vast and intricate that even the Egyptians told Herodotus he wouldn't be allowed to see the lower levels. Why? Because they contain the tombs of kings and sacred crocodiles. Let that linger. Sacred crocodiles. Herodotus wasn't the only one. Later, writers Strabo, Diodorus, Siculus, Pliny the Elder also referenced the labyrinth. They all agreed on one thing: it was real, huge, complex, and terrifying in its scale. So what happened to it? This is where it gets strange. For centuries, the labyrinth was considered lost, possibly exaggerated, or even completely fictional. Some speculated it was destroyed by floods or dismantled for stone. Others thought Herodotus had misunderstood an ordinary temple. Then, in 1888, a British archaeologist named Flinders Petrie began digging near the village of Hawara, about 90 kilometers south of Cairo, near the Fayoum oasis. And what he found matched the descriptions. He uncovered a massive artificial plateau made of limestone and alabaster. Beneath it, walls, pillars, foundations of something vast engineered and aligned far too carefully to be random. Petrie believed he had found the labyrinth's remains, long collapsed, scavenged, and buried under centuries of Nile silt and shifting sands. But he wasn't allowed to excavate fully. Why? Partly logistics, partly politics, and partly because the water table had risen, flooding the lower levels. Even today, much of the site lies beneath murky groundwater. No cameras, no explorers, just mud and mystery. You wander its imagined halls, now your footsteps echoing against smooth stone. You turn a corner and find a chamber lined with symbols, some familiar, some not. You descend a spiral ramp following the curve of architecture that feels both modern and ancient. You run your fingers along carvings too precise for time to blur. And in this imagined space, you hear something that never made it into Herodotus's account. Whispers. Theories swirl around the labyrinth like desert winds. Some believe it was a ceremonial structure, each court representing one of Egypt's provinces. Others say it was an archive storing text scrolls and knowledge lost to time. A few suggest it held esoteric wisdom from an older civilization passed down in stone. And yes, there are fringe ideas too. That beneath the labyrinth lies a chamber filled with metallic tablets recording a forgotten pre-dynastic past. That it was built not by Egyptians, but before them. A hall of records, as some call it. Historians still argue over the purpose of the labyrinth. What's clear is this: it was deliberately hidden. Why build something so immense only to let it vanish? Some say it was protection from looters, invaders, or decay. Others think the structure served a ritual function, and once its cycle ended, it was allowed to sink into myth. But here's a thought that won't leave you. What if the real reason no one has rebuilt the labyrinth is because we're not supposed to? You sit on the stone bench of your mind, tracing the line between memory and imagination. Above you, painted ceilings faded, but still alive. Below you, the unseen levels. And around you, the weight of design that once held thousands of lives, ideas' secrets. Because here's the thing about labyrinths: they weren't always traps. In ancient cultures, labyrinths were often spiritual tools, paths for meditation, journeys inward. Unlike mazes which confuse and divide, labyrinths guide. They take you to the center of something, and then they bring you back out. So maybe the Egyptian labyrinth wasn't just stone. Maybe it was an idea, a ritual, a map for the soul. And if you really think about it, you're walking a labyrinth right now. This whole night, this drift through forgotten cities and unexplained wonders isn't straight. It's winding, You take turns, you find chambers, you lose your way. And with every step you come a little closer to the center of something not yet named. You don't need a map for this kind of travel. You just need to keep going. So tonight, as your breath slows and your heart follows its own looping path, imagine a city built not to be conquered, but contemplated. A place where the dead slept beside sacred animals, where rulers left no monuments, but corridors that echoed with thought. You won't find a plaque. You won't find a headline. But if you ever walk that buried road again beneath the heat and above the tombs, remember this. You were already there, and now you're ready for what comes next. You step back into the sun, and this time it's a sharp and blinding white. The desert around you ripples like a mirage, the heat rising in soft waves as if the earth itself is exhaling. Ahead, a shape cuts against the haze, triangular, massive, casting a shadow that seems to stretch through time itself. The Great Pyramid of Giza. Of all the wonders you've drifted through tonight, this is the one that doesn't hide. It never tried. It stood proudly in the Egyptian sands for more than 4,500 years, one of the few surviving wonders of the ancient world. And yet, the more visible it is, the more deeply mysterious it becomes, because the more we study it, the less it makes sense. You take a step closer. The first thing that strikes you is the scale. Each of the 2 million limestone blocks that make up the pyramid weighs between 2 and 15 tons. The precision is staggering. Gaps between blocks are tighter than a credit card. The sides of the pyramid are almost perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west, off by mere fractions of a degree. And all this was done supposedly without the wheel. Mainstream Egyptologists will tell you the pyramid was built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, using massive labor forces, copper tools, sledges, and ropes. And yes, inscriptions found nearby do reference work crews and logistics. But here's where things get wobbly. To build the pyramid in the 20 years, often proposed workers would have had to set a stone every 2 to 3 minutes, 24 hours a day, every day, without break. No missed days, no weather problems, no human error. Think about that. Even with modern machinery, that schedule would be nearly impossible. With Bronze Age tools under the blazing sun, pulling 15-ton blocks up a 50-degree incline. Historians still argue. Some propose internal ramps. Others argue for advanced surveying tools lost to history. And still others suggest that we're missing a big piece of the puzzle, maybe even a different timeline altogether. And then there's the engineering inside. You duck through a narrow passage and find yourself in the Grand Gallery, a corridor unlike anything else in ancient architecture. Sloped, polished, lined with corbelled stone that still defies clear explanation. The pyramid has air shafts, yes, air shafts cut through solid stone that align with stars like Orion's belt and Sirius. No inscriptions inside, no murals, no tomb markings, just geometry, silence, and a sense of being watched. And here's the oddest part. No mummy of Khufu has ever been found inside the pyramid. In fact, none of the Great Pyramids have yielded a royal body. Was it looted? Possibly. But there's no evidence of traditional burial either. No remnants of coffins, grave goods, or embalming tools. That leaves you with two uncomfortable options. Either these monuments were cleared out completely with surgical precision, or they were never tombs to begin with. Some researchers suggest they were temples. Others think they were power plants, or astronomical observatories, or instruments of sound resonance. Some even claim they stored knowledge, not bodies. Here's one theory. The pyramid may encode pi and the golden ratio in its proportions, that its dimensions reflect the curvature of the Earth and the distance to the Sun. A coincidence? Perhaps. But if it is, it's a very precise one. And it doesn't stop there. The placement of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau mirrors the belt of Orion. The shafts inside point to stars visible during Khufu's reign. The Sphinx nearby faces the rising sun on the equinox with uncanny accuracy. You begin to wonder, were these people building tombs? Or were they building messages? Some fringe thinkers believe the pyramid holds records perhaps under it. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, once predicted a hall of records buried beneath the Sphinx's paw. While no such chamber has been confirmed, seismic scans have shown hollow anomalies under the plateau. Still, Egypt's antiquities, authorities restrict deep excavation. Whether it's due to preservation or secrets, no one really knows. You take a seat on a warm block of stone, its surface polished by centuries of sun and footsteps. You imagine the workers who built it. Maybe they weren't slaves as once believed. Maybe they were skilled artisans, proud of what they were, creating a monument that would outlast memory. And maybe they weren't just building for Pharaoh. Maybe they were building for us. Because when you think about it, the Great Pyramid doesn't feel like something meant to be seen. It feels like something meant to be understood, or decoded, or one day remembered when we were finally ready. And tonight, under the stars, you might be closer to that moment than ever. You lean back. Let your eyes trace the slope of stone rising above you. Once it was covered in polished white casing stones, gleaming in the sun like a beacon. Some say it could be seen from miles away, a lighthouse of eternity. Now it stands a little shorter, worn, weathered, but still defiant, still whispering. You may never know exactly why it was built. You may never know what secrets it holds. But as the desert breeze rises and slips through the narrow corridors, something becomes very clear. It was meant to last, and that whatever it meant means something. You're climbing now. It's not a steep climb, but every step feels deliberate, stone beneath your soles, chilled by altitude. The wind tugs gently at your sleeves, and you smell something sharp in the air. Mountain grass granite, the memory of cold rain. You've come to Sacsayhuamán. Say it slowly, Sacsayhuamán. A fortress, a temple, a mystery. Just above the ancient Incan capital of Cusco in the Peruvian Andes, Sacsayhuamán stands like a riddle carved into the bones of the earth. The first thing you notice isn't the height, the location, or the view, though all three are breathtaking. It's the walls. They shouldn't exist. Massive stone blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons, fit together with such precision that not even a razor blade can slide between them. No mortar, no modern machines, just colossal stones stacked in interlocking patterns, forming a zigzag fortress wall that defies not only time, but logic. You run your hand across one of them. The surface is smooth, but not perfect. There are curves, bumps, intentional bulges. These aren't bricks, they're boulders hand-carved to match the stones around them, like an impossible 3D jigsaw puzzle. Historians still argue whether this is purely Incan or partially pre-Incan, built atop something older. Some of the stones are so large and heavy that they rival or exceed the blocks used in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet there are no inscriptions, no blueprints, no documentation of how they were moved, lifted, and placed. So how did they do it? The standard explanation is this: ramps, ropes, logs, and manpower. But the scale of the effort needed to transport and fit stones this size, especially up steep mountain terrain, would have required millimeter-level planning and coordination that seems impossible without modern technology. And if you're imagining dozens of men heaving a 100-ton block up a slope using nothing but vines and muscle, your brain starts to twitch. Some alternative theories suggest advanced knowledge of leverage pulleys or lost construction techniques. Others drift further, claiming sonic tools, anti-gravity technologies, or the intervention of sky people. And while those might sound outlandish, one thing's for sure: we still don't really know. Sacsayhuamán isn't just a marvel of stonework. It's an experience. You climb higher and reach the upper terraces. The view of Cusco sprawls out below, shaped like a puma. Yes, the Incas designed their city that way. A puma sacred to their mythology, with Sacsayhuamán as the head. This wasn't just a fortress. It was cosmic, symbolic, strategic, The Incas didn't separate engineering from spirituality. They built with the heavens in mind. Temples aligned with solstices, pathways that mirrored the stars. Mountains weren't obstacles, they were gods. So, when you stand at Sacsayhuamán, you're not standing at a military outpost. You're standing at a crossroads of myth and matter. Archaeologists have discovered ceremonial platforms, sacred fountains, and subterranean chambers beneath the site. It's believed that massive festivals like the Inti Raymi, or Festival of the Sun, were held here with thousands of people gathered to honor the sun god Inti. And yet, something about the stonework feels older than the Incas. Even the Incas in their oral histories referred to the structure as built by giants or earlier peoples whose names have been lost. Could it be that the Incas inherited and expanded an earlier structure? That's a theme you'll see again and again. Tonight, civilizations building atop forgotten civilizations, each layer assuming they were the first, while the ground beneath their feet whispered otherwise. You pass by one of the oddest features of Sacsayhuamán, what some call the Serpent's Trail, a long, smoothly curved rock slide worn into the stone itself. Some say it was ceremonial. Others believe it was for play, or some forgotten rite of passage. Whatever it was, it's polished smooth by centuries of use. Even mystery has fingerprints. And here's a quiet, strange fact: during the Spanish conquest of Peru, the invaders attempted to dismantle Sacsayhuamán. They used the smaller stones for buildings in Cusco, but they couldn't move the largest ones. Even with their horses and iron tools, the Spanish were baffled. They saw it as demonic. They couldn't understand how a so-called primitive people could craft something so enduring, so mathematically perfect. You lean against one of the stones now. It leans back indifferent, but somehow alive. Because here's the thing about Sacsayhuamán. It doesn't care if you believe in lost technologies. It doesn't need your approval or your theories. It's not waiting for an answer. It is the answer. The builders knew what they were doing. Maybe not with blueprints, but with something deeper: intimacy with stone. A knowledge passed down not on parchment, but through hands and ritual. A memory so old, it lived in the bones, not the books. And tonight, under a slow-falling Andean dusk, you're not solving the mystery. You're participating in it. Because some places aren't puzzles to be cracked. They're songs to be listened to. And the only way to understand them is to stand still and let them echo through you. You close your eyes. Let the cool stone ground you. Let the wind tell you stories. Let the age of the mountain hold you for a moment longer. You don't need to understand the architecture. You just need to feel the patience that shaped it. You're not walking anymore. You're just staring upward, outward at something that shouldn't exist. This is Baalbek, and it's not just old, it's wrong. It's too big, too heavy, too deliberate. In the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, beneath the ruins of a Roman temple complex, lies a platform of stones so massive they make pyramids look like puzzles for children. This is the Baalbek Trilithon, 3 stones each, weighing over 800 tons, laid side by side atop a foundation wall. Not far from them lies the stone of the pregnant woman, even larger, weighing more than 1,000 tons. And recently, in 2014, archaeologists discovered an even bigger block nearby, possibly the largest worked stone ever quarried by human hands, at over 1,650 tons. You hear those numbers, but they don't land. So let's make it simpler. Those stones are heavier than jumbo jets, heavier than space shuttles, heavier than your entire neighborhood. And yet, they're here, moved, cut, aligned. The Romans did build here. They constructed a massive temple to Jupiter around 60 AD, placing exquisite Corinthian columns and golden sculptures on the site. But those massive stones, they were already there. The Romans built on top of them. Even ancient Roman historians were vague about the platform. There's no clear record of how they moved the stones, no engineering diagrams, no ancient press releases boasting, "Here's how we did it." Just silence. And that silence, That's what makes Baalbek hum. Because here's what historians still argue about. Who placed the trilithon, when, and how? Some scholars suggest the stones were quarried and moved using a combination of sledges, pulleys, and manpower, perhaps over months, even years. But there's a problem. The quarry is located uphill from the site about 800 meters away, which means the builders would have had to drag these 1,000-ton blocks downhill with absolute control and then lift them into place with millimeter-level accuracy. Try that with ropes and wooden rollers. Even today, no modern crane can replicate that feat in one piece. If we were to move one of these stones, we'd likely cut it into sections, relocate it with extreme planning, and reassemble it using laser-guided machinery. But 2,000 years ago, and even more confusing possibly before the Romans, that's the riddle. Some suggest the stones are remnants of a Phoenician or pre-Phoenician temple, maybe one dedicated to Baal, the thunder god. Others point to earlier Mesopotamian influence, noting that Baalbek was a crossroads for cultures Egyptian, Babylonian, Hittite. A few whisper the usual ancient giants, Atlanteans lost knowledge, or visitors not entirely of this earth. You don't have to believe those theories to feel their pull. Because when you stand beside one of these stones, really stand there, put your hand against the dust-worn surface, feel its cold resolve, you understand something. This wasn't about decoration. This was about intent. No one moves a 1,000-ton rock on a whim. This was ceremonial, purposeful. A message carved not in words, but in gravity. So what was the message? That's the part we still don't know. You walk slowly through the ruins above the platform, the columns of the Roman temple toppled by earthquakes and conquests. Birds nest in broken capitals. Grass pushes through marble cracks. But beneath it all, the trilithon remains, unshaken, as if it's not really from here, as if it's older than the city, older than the language, and maybe it is. Some researchers have pointed out that the builders of Baalbek may have been using megalithic harmonics not just for structure, but for sound. That these massive stones may have resonated with particular frequencies, creating a vibrational field that interacted with human consciousness. Sound crazy? Well, modern engineers have experimented with acoustic levitation, moving small objects using nothing but sound. We know certain temples and caves amplify frequencies in specific ways, designed to create altered mental states. Could Baalbek's scale and shape have been part of a larger energetic system? We don't know. But the silence of Baalbek is too deliberate to ignore. You climb onto a nearby ledge and look across the platform. Wind rustles your jacket. Below, a cat naps in the shadow of the stone of the pregnant woman, utterly unbothered by human mystery. The past doesn't concern her. She lives in the now. But you're caught between epochs. You imagine what it would have taken the teams of workers, the orders barked in forgotten tongues, the weeks of measurement and trial. Or maybe none of that. Maybe someone knew exactly how to do it. No trial, just memory. And now, we've lost it. Here's the quiet truth of Baalbek: it humbles you. Not just because of the engineering, but because it reminds you that human arrogance is often louder than human understanding. We think we've got history all sorted out, timetables, chronologies, textbook facts. But then you find a block of stone so big, so perfectly placed, that you're left with only one honest answer. I don't know. And that's okay. Tonight, as your breath slows and your thoughts wander deeper, Baalbek becomes less a monument and more a mantra. You don't have to explain everything. You just have to witness it. So breathe in the silence. Let the dust settle on your shoulders. Lean back against a stone older than empires. And for just a moment, feel what it's like to be very, very small, in the presence of something still listening. You don't hear it at first. You feel it beneath your shoes, a vibration low and ancient that settles in your bones like a memory you can't place. It's as though the ground itself is holding its breath. You're standing before Stonehenge, not the postcard version, the tourist-crowded souvenir shop backdrop, but the one that exists in twilight. fog curling around the stones, the wind carrying whispers in Old English, in Druidic chants, in something older still. This is one of the most iconic monuments in the world. And yet, we know so little about it that each fact feels more like a question. Stonehenge in southern England is a circle of massive standing stones, some over 13 feet high and 25 tons in weight, arranged with uncanny precision. Built in stages over 1,500 years, it dates back as far as 3100 BCE, predating the Great Pyramid of Giza. The stones are divided into two types, the larger sarsens and the smaller bluestones. The sarsens are local. The bluestones. They come from Preseli Hills in Wales, nearly 150 miles away. Pause there for a second. Imagine moving 4-ton stones 150 miles without wheels, engines, or flatbed trucks. Some suggest rolling the stones on logs. Others believe they floated them on rafts along ancient rivers. But either way, the logistics are staggering. And for what? That's the question we keep asking. Stonehenge doesn't have a single purpose that historians can agree on. Was it a temple? A burial site? A calendar? A place of healing? A monument to the dead? Some argue it's all of these and more. What we do know is that it's aligned with the solstices. The central axis points directly at the sunrise on the summer solstice and sunset on the winter solstice. Thousands still gather here every June to watch the sun rise between the heel stone and the altar stone, just as ancient people did thousands of years ago. And that's not coincidence. That's cosmic architecture. But the mystery doesn't end with alignment. Underneath Stonehenge lies evidence of hundreds of burials, most cremated. Some bodies show signs of disease and healing attempts, suggesting this place may have been seen as a spiritual hospital, a place people traveled to not just for ceremony, but for hope. You walk between the stones and your eyes drift upward. Some stand in pairs topped by lintels to form door-like structures. Others lean or lie fallen, but none of them feel accidental. Even in collapse, there's a kind of purpose. The lintels are curved deliberately so that when fitted together, they form a perfect ring. And they're held in place by mortise and tenon joints, the same kind used in woodworking. That level of craftsmanship in stone, it's jaw-dropping. And then there's the acoustic mystery. Studies show that Stonehenge's circular shape creates strange and specific sound reverberations. Claps, voices, drums, they all echo in particular ways, suggesting the site may have been used not just for visual spectacle, but for ritual sound. Historians still argue whether these effects were intentional or just a happy accident. But when you stand in the center of the circle, you feel it, a hum that isn't quite heard, only sensed. Like the earth is singing through your ribcage. Some theorists even speculate that Stonehenge was part of a network of sites aligned with ley lines, geometric paths, said to connect the Earth's energies, temples, and sacred spots. Whether you believe in energy grids or not, the geographic positioning of Stonehenge is undeniably deliberate. And then there's what lies underground. Modern ground-penetrating radar has revealed that Stonehenge is just the tip of a much larger complex. There are ditches, pits, post holes, and burial mounds stretching for miles. One nearby site, Durrington Walls, appears to have been a huge Neolithic village, possibly housing the workers who helped construct the monument. So we return to the question, who were these people? They didn't have writing, so we have no names. But they weren't primitive. Their architectural understanding, their astronomical knowledge, their planning, all suggest an advanced, coordinated society. And maybe they weren't building for themselves. Maybe they were building for time. Think about it. To drag stones across countries, to shape and place them so precisely, to align them with stars and seasons. That takes more than skill. It takes vision, a desire to outlive your own life. Stonehenge doesn't commemorate something. It anticipates something. You sit at the edge now, your back against a fallen stone. It's warm from the day's sun, though night begins to spread across the sky. The stars above mirror the circle below, like the monument was made to reflect the heavens. Maybe it was. Maybe the ancients saw themselves as part of a cosmic machine gears turning in time with stars and seasons. Maybe Stonehenge was their way of saying, "We were here, we knew something, don't forget," but we did forget. And now we're relearning slowly, one stone at a time. And maybe that's okay, because mystery has a different kind of power. It keeps us wondering, listening, hoping that in the silence between facts, we might still hear the heartbeat of an ancient world that never truly left. So tonight, let the circle close around you. Let the stones guard your sleep. Let the questions settle like mist on grass. You don't need all the answers. You just need to remember to ask. The night air shifts again, cooler now, deeper somehow, like you've dropped beneath the surface of what's known. You're not on a hill anymore. You're under it, and what waits here doesn't rise, it sinks. Welcome to the Osirian at Abydos. If you blink, you might miss it. On the surface, it looks like a standard temple ruin, another noble structure weathered by Egyptian centuries. But this buried deep behind the famed temple of Seti the Mon is something else entirely. Something older, something out of place. You descend a narrow stone stairway, your fingertips brushing walls that sweat with condensation. The light fades as you step into a pit. A trench. A hollow carved not out of ignorance, but out of supreme confidence. This is the Osirion, a chamber of megalithic blocks, some weighing up to 100 tons. These stones are perfectly squared, immaculately placed. And unlike the ornate carvings on the surrounding temple of Seti, the Osirion is silent. No hieroglyphs, no art, just stone. Unadorned, unexplained, unmoved. Mainstream Egyptologists will tell you the Osirion was built as a symbolic tomb for the god Osiris, the deity of death and rebirth. It was supposedly constructed by Seti the One, whose much more decorated temple looms nearby. But here's the rub: the architectural style of the Osirion doesn't match the rest of the New Kingdom. It's far older. The floor of the Osirion lies 15 feet below the surrounding structures, submerged for most of the year by groundwater. That suggests two things. Either Seti I built it as a strange sunken temple, or he discovered it, found it already ancient, and added his own monument next to it, like planting a rose beside a fossil. Historians still argue. Some date the Osirion to 1300 BCE. Others whisper of dates 10 times older, suggesting it could predate dynastic Egypt entirely. The lack of decoration, the colossal stonework, and the geological context all hint at something that doesn't quite fit the known timeline. You pause in the center of the chamber. Water laps at the stone around your boots. The design is curious pillars arranged in a rectangular grid, reminiscent of temples from much later, like the Temple of Solomon, or even certain South American structures. That's the strange part: the Osirion doesn't feel Egyptian. It feels global. Which raises an uncomfortable question: were the ancient Egyptians inheritors of something even more ancient? Some alternative researchers have suggested that the Osirion might be a surviving piece of a forgotten civilization, a people with architectural capabilities far beyond what we give credit for at that point in time. And this isn't just wild speculation. Look at the comparison. The Osirion's precision, size, and style more closely resemble structures like the trilithons of Baalbek or the stone platforms of Puma Punku than the temples of Karnak or Luxor. And then there's the symbolism. Osiris wasn't just any god. He represented resurrection, transformation, the cycling of ages. Placing this strange structure at Abydos, Egypt's oldest and most sacred city, wasn't coincidence. Abydos was where Egyptians believed the soul of Osiris descended into the earth. In myth, Osiris was dismembered by his jealous brother, scattered across the land, and then brought back to life by Isis. The Osirion is believed to symbolically house his tomb, a place between worlds, submerged, echoing with water and time. You look around. Above you, a ceiling that seems too high for its builders. Around you, pillars that refuse to fall. And in the center, a narrow path across the flooded floor, almost like a causeway for the dead. You walk it now, carefully, slowly. As you do, you think about the water. In Egyptian cosmology, the primordial waters none preceded all creation. Perhaps the Osirian was meant to float in those waters, not be seen, not be admired, but exist as an engine of ritual and rebirth. There's a theory, a strange one, but stay with it, that structures like the Osirian weren't just physical monuments. They were acoustic devices, that the architecture, shape, and materials were chosen not just for strength, but for resonance. When certain frequencies, chants, drums, voices reverberated through the stone chambers, they created harmonics that altered consciousness, induced trance, opened the mind. Some even claim these were gateways, not to other worlds perhaps, but to other states of being. It might sound fringe, but think of the Hypogem in Malta or the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. There's precedent. You sit on one of the stone blocks now. It's wet beneath you, cold, but it feels solid in a way nothing else tonight has, like it's not just resisting time, it's ignoring it. You imagine the builders, whoever they were. Did they walk barefoot across this floor? Did they believe this place would survive the fall of empires? Did they understand the flow of water, the rise of stars, the echo of a whispered name? Or were they just trying to remember something they themselves had already lost? That's the humbling truth of the Osirian. It doesn't just challenge our timeline, it challenges our memory. It reminds us that we may not be the first to forget, and as you rise, letting the water drip from your fingertips, you feel it again, that low vibration. It's not coming from the ground anymore, it's coming from within you. The realization that mystery isn't something you solve, it's something you carry. Like a stone, like a story, like the shadow of a god who never really died. This time the air tastes like salt. You're standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable, the open sea but deeper than water. Ahead of you, jagged waves crash against the rocks of Yonaguni, the westernmost of Japan's inhabited islands, and then you see it just beneath the surface. Rectangles, terraces, steps, columns, all too straight, too sharp, too intentional. They call it the Yonaguni Monument, but no one agrees on what it actually is. Discovered in 1986 by a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake, this underwater formation has since sparked decades of heated debate. Some say it's the remnants of an ancient civilization lost beneath the waves. Others insist it's simply natural rock shaped by ocean currents and time. But tonight, as you drift toward the submerged steps, you're allowed to wonder, what if it's both? You lower yourself into the warm Okinawan waters. Visibility is clear. Fish flit between the cracks. The deeper you go, the more surreal the sight becomes. A massive platform nearly 500 feet long and 90 feet wide appears like a sunken ziggurat. The structure includes broad steps, flat terraces, sharp corners, and what looks like a grand staircase. There's even a sort of main road, a straight corridor flanked by steep walls almost like a ceremonial walkway. Some stones are etched with grooves resembling what could be pillars or drainage channels. Others form near-perfect right angles with vertical cuts that would be difficult to explain through erosion alone. Mainstream geologists claim this is all the result of tectonic fracturing. Sandstone slabs naturally break in layers, and the sea can smooth and shape them in curious ways. And yes, Japan lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a geologically active region, prone to earthquakes and submarine shifts. But the precision here is unsettling. Could it all really be natural? Japanese marine geologist Masaki Kimura doesn't think so. He believes Yonaguni is man-made, or at least man-modified, and possibly dates back over 10,000 years long before the accepted dawn of civilization. He's even identified what he believes to be symbols, staircases, and sculptures, including a massive stone face and a carved turtle. Critics call his claims speculative. But there's something undeniably strange about Yonaguni. It doesn't quite behave like nature alone. And the older it's estimated to be, the more it challenges our view of human history. Here's why. If Yonaguni was shaped by human hands, then it was built during a time when, according to Orthodox history, humans were still hunter-gatherers, thousands of years before the rise of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Indus Valley. That would mean advanced construction occurred before agriculture writing or the wheel. It would mean an entire chapter of humanity's story has been erased by time and tide. Historians still argue. Some propose Yonaguni was once above sea level, part of a greater sunken city, now lost due to rising ocean waters at the end of the last ice age. That puts the structure's submersion around 8000 BCE, which corresponds with known sea level rise after glacial melt. Could this have been Mu? That's one theory, an ancient lost continent spoken of in Pacific lore. Like Atlantis, Mu was said to be a technologically advanced society wiped out by floods or earth shifts. Most scholars consider Mu a myth, but then again, myths tend to echo from something. The indigenous Ryukyuan people of Okinawa tell stories of ancient sea gods and sunken kingdoms. Their oral traditions speak of structures beneath the waves of places no longer visible, but never forgotten. As you hover near the central stairway, watching small fish dart through rectangular voids, you can't help but feel like a guest in someone else's blueprint. This doesn't feel accidental, and that's the real mystery in tension. Was this a ritual platform, a port, a palace, a monument to gods drowned in the surf? There's no pottery here, no bones, no tools, no artifacts to confirm one way or another. The sea has swallowed it all if there ever was anything to begin with. And yet, this place makes you feel something. A hush, a reverence, like you're trespassing in a cathedral built for the ocean itself. And maybe that's what it is. Because here's the strange part. Yonaguni isn't the only underwater anomaly. Across the globe in Cuba, India's Gulf of Combat Lake Titicaca, and the Caribbean, we've found submerged structures, roads, and pyramidal shapes. None fully explained. None comfortably slotted into textbooks. Could it be that entire coastal civilizations were wiped away at the end of the Ice Age? Their cities sunk so completely, we've forgotten they even existed. If so, Yonaguni may be the first whisper of that forgotten chorus. You break the surface now, blinking into starlight. The monument disappears beneath you, swallowed again by the black water. But it lingers in your chest, in your thoughts. Because whether it's natural, artificial, or somewhere in between, the Yonaguni monument forces us to ask, how old is the story we're telling ourselves? Maybe older than we think. And that's the quiet power of mysteries. Like this, they remind us that the past isn't a closed book. It's a scroll still being unrolled slowly, carefully by hands we'll never see. You turn back toward the shore. Waves slap at the stone jetty. Crickets begin their lullaby inland. But out there beneath the waves, something is still waiting. The stone breathes. That's the first thought that comes to you as you approach the Kailasa Temple in Ellora, India. It's not because the stone is alive, not in the way your skin is, but because something about this place feels carved from something beating, something vast, something ancient. You're standing at the edge of a mountain, but instead of building up, someone built down. This is the Kailasa Temple, also known as Cave 16 of the Ellora Caves. And it wasn't constructed by stacking stone, it was carved downward into the rock, not assembled, excavated, chiseled from a single monolithic basalt cliff. It's not a building, it's a subtraction. Imagine a mountain. Now imagine removing over 200,000 tons of stone from it by hand until you've revealed a freestanding temple complete with massive pillars, galleries, bridges, stairways, elephants, lions, shrines, sculptures, and a towering spire reaching 100 feet into the sky. Now imagine doing that in the 8th century with no dynamite, no power tools, no cranes. That's Kailasa. And here's where it gets even stranger. Historians estimate it may have taken only 18 years to complete. Let that number settle in. 18 years to dig out millions of cubic feet of rock to sculpt it into divine precision while leaving no structural mistakes, no major collapses, no room for error. It's a feat so ambitious, so mathematically demanding, that modern engineers still scratch their heads. Historians believe it was commissioned by King Krishna I of the Rashtrakuta dynasty around 756 CE. It was intended as a tribute to Lord Shiva, one of the principal deities of Hinduism. The temple was meant to replicate Mount Kailash Shiva's legendary Himalayan abode. And it doesn't just replicate, it radiates. Everything about the structure is meant to pull you upward, inward, deeper into the divine. But as you walk through its entrance gate sculpted directly into the living rock, you don't feel like you're entering a monument. You feel like you're being drawn into a mind. This isn't architecture, it's vision-made stone. Elephants carved into the base of the courtyard appear to support the weight of the entire temple. Life-sized guardians flank doorways with expressions of fury and serenity. Above, a soaring Vimana temple tower reaches into the sky, still attached to the cliff face from which it was carved. There are bridges that seem to defy logic, delicate stone spans connecting galleries suspended without the benefit of construction joints or steel reinforcements. Just faith and chisels. How did they plan this? Carving from the top down means no mistakes. There were no second chances. Each strike of the hammer had to anticipate what would come 3 levels later. Rooms had to be hollowed from above, staircases carved before the floor beneath them even existed. And every wall statue and relief had to emerge, not be placed, but revealed. Historians still argue how such an enormous task was coordinated. Some suggest thousands of workers labored in teams, each following a strict design plan etched onto the cliff face. Others theorize a master architect mapped the entire complex using a system of chalk lines, geometry, and oral instructions. But what's missing again is any written record. No blueprints, no journals, no stone tablets explaining the order of construction. It just appeared, like memory, like myth. And here's a beautiful contradiction. Despite the sheer weight of its construction, Kailasa feels light, airy, spiritual. The carvings are animated. The walls ripple with scenes from the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and tales of gods, demons, battles, births, and transcendence. You wander past sculpted panels where Ravana lifts Mount Kailash in defiance, where Shiva dances the cosmic dance of creation and destruction, where Parvati, his consort, gazes with serene defiance at an invading army of stone. But there's something more subtle too. In the temple's heart, where the lingam, a symbol of Shiva's eternal form, stands, a hush falls. The stone here doesn't echo, it absorbs. The air grows cooler, your footsteps slow. And whether you believe in gods or not, you feel something presence, maybe. Or just the lingering awe of 1,000 years of footsteps that paused here in reverence before you. And like many sacred places, the Kailasa Temple comes with its share of whispers. Some claim it couldn't have been made in 18 years. That such speed, such precision, such perfect negative space would have required technologies lost to us. Sonic carving, forgotten tools, advanced surveying methods. Some even suggest extraterrestrial influence. As always, the further out the theory, the less evidence it has. But the fact remains, we can't replicate it easily today. Modern 3D scans have revealed that the temple is even more complex than it looks. Hidden chambers, interior alignments, acoustic hotspots, mathematical ratios that mirror those used in sacred geometry across cultures, all carved from one mountain. So here's the quiet wonder of Kailasa. It stands not in defiance of time, but in conversation with it. It says, we remembered something, and we shaped it into stone. And maybe that's what you're really standing in tonight, not a temple, but a memory palace. A map of a worldview where the divine wasn't above or below, but all around. where mountains breathed and gods walked, and stone could be made soft with vision. You sit on the steps now. They're worn but not broken. The air smells of incense and old rain. Somewhere a bell chimes softly, echoing off a column carved 200 years ago and still standing. Maybe the builders knew their names would be lost. Maybe that was the point. Because you don't need to be remembered if what you made is unforgettable. And as you close your eyes here in this hollowed mountain, the earth feels just a little lighter, the stone a little warmer, the night a little closer. You're not just beneath the temple, you're inside it. And maybe it's inside you too. There's a kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing against your chest. Not empty, but full of questions, of echoes of all the words that were never spoken aloud. That's the silence of the Longyou Caves. You are in Zhejiang Province, China, about 200 miles southwest of Shanghai. The area looks ordinary enough: fields, trees, the occasional farmhouse. But beneath this humble countryside lies a wonder that defies logic. Dozens of massive hand-carved caverns, each big enough to hold a cathedral, completely unknown until 1992, when a group of curious locals decided to drain a mysterious pond. What they found beneath the water was not a natural cave. It was architecture: perfectly vertical walls, chiseled steps, stone pillars holding up a sculpted ceiling 30 feet above the floor. One cave led to another, and another, and another. 24 in total, and possibly more still undiscovered. Each one carved out of solid siltstone with geometric precision. But here's the first mystery: there's no record of them. No mention in local folklore, no entries in historical texts. Not a single tool, skeleton, or artifact has been found. Not even a dropped chisel. It's as though they weren't built. They were removed. Each cave spans about 1,000 square meters, with some reaching up to 30 meters, about 100 feet high. The combined volume of stone removed from all 24 caves is estimated at over 1 million cubic meters. Pause on that. To carve that much stone by hand without explosives or modern equipment would take thousands of workers, many decades if not centuries. And for what? No signs of habitation, no shrines, no tombs, just silence, space, and stone. One feature appears throughout all the caves: a series of parallel chisel marks running along the walls and ceilings, as if an artist was stroking the entire surface with a single deliberate brush. The consistency is uncanny down to the millimeter. Historians still argue, were these caves used for storage, military shelter, ceremonial purposes? Theories abound, but none satisfy the sheer scale or craftsmanship. A few scholars believe the caves may be over 2,000 years old, dating back to the Qin or Han dynasties. But without organic material to carbon date, that's just an educated guess. The caves are bone dry remarkably, so despite being carved into a landscape known for its rivers and rainfall. Their engineering is so precise that even after centuries, the interiors remain structurally sound and moisture-free. No flooding, no collapse, no visible decay. It's as if they were carved and then forgotten or hidden. And then there's the acoustic mystery. When you clap your hands inside one of the larger chambers, the sound bounces off the walls in a way that seems engineered: echoes that curve and twist back at you, not randomly, but like a reply. Some researchers have suggested the caves may have been used for ritual sound or chanting, similar to theories about the hypogeum in Malta or the pyramids in Egypt. Others propose they were giant musical instruments, vibrating at frequencies that could alter mood or consciousness. Again, fringe ideas, but ones that arise naturally when facts go missing. And make no mistake, the facts are missing. Who built these caves? Why? How did they coordinate the excavation with such exactness across multiple chambers without electricity, digital measurements, or even written records? You wander deeper now, passing under a narrow archway into a secondary chamber. It's darker here, but your footsteps still make no sound. The walls seem to drink in the noise, as though the space doesn't want to be disturbed. You reach out and touch the chisel marks. Each groove is shallow, curved, repeating in hypnotic rhythm. It doesn't feel like a construction project. It feels like an expression, as though the rock was written in. And maybe it was. Chinese researchers have tried replicating the chisel patterns using traditional tools. The results? Sloppy, uneven. Modern artisans can't match the original symmetry, even with practice. So, who were these unknown stonemasons with such surreal consistency? Local legend doesn't offer much. Some villagers believe the caves were the work of the Dragon Kings, mythical rulers of water and weather. Others say they were carved by giants. Still others insist they must have been created by foreign hands, a now lost civilization whose knowledge was either erased or absorbed and forgotten. Maybe the truth is simpler, or maybe it's far more complex than we're prepared to accept. Because here's the uncomfortable idea. Perhaps history isn't a single thread, but a tapestry woven from half-remembered dreams. The Longyou Caves are a hole in that tapestry, one no one has yet patched. And maybe they're meant to remain open. Maybe some places are designed to hold space, not answers. You find a flat stone and sit watching a dust mote hover in a shaft of filtered light. It drifts lazily, timeless. You imagine the workers, the chisels, the sweat and torches and planning it would have taken. Did they sing while they worked? Did they know they were making something that would outlive even their gods? Or were they copying something older? Remembering, not inventing. And here's the truth that hums in your chest, like an echo. The Longyou Caves don't want to be solved. They want to be felt, like a breath drawn and never quite released, like a lullaby sung in a language no one speaks anymore. So tonight, let the stones surround you. Let the quiet wrap around your spine. There's no wind here, no insects, just the hum of your heartbeat and the slow remembering of something buried, not just in the earth, but in you. You don't have to understand the caves. You only have to enter and listen. The sea kept it quiet for 2,000 years, not because it meant to, but because that's what the ocean does best. It erases, preserves, buries, reveals. And what it revealed in 1901 off the Greek island of Antikythera was so baffling, so advanced, that for a time no one dared to believe it. You've heard the name before, the Antikythera Mechanism, but tonight you're going to see it. The way it was found, tangled in the wreckage of an ancient Roman ship, rusted green, locked in coral, half vanished into barnacles. At first glance, it looked like a lump of bronze. Then someone spotted teeth. Not human ones, gears. Dozens of them interlocked in complex ratios, their edges finely cut, some with more than 200 tiny teeth. Over time, the full picture began to emerge, a mechanical computer built sometime between 150 and 100 BCE, capable of calculating the positions of the sun, moon, and possibly planets years into the future. Let that sink in. A device that could predict eclipses, track lunar phases, and model celestial movement, built over 2,000 years ago. And then, nothing like it appeared again for more than a millennium. Historians still argue whether it was unique or just the lone survivor of a larger tradition of Greek mechanics. Some suggest it was built in Rhodes, home to the astronomer Hipparchus. Others say it must be connected to Archimedes, whose writings hinted at mechanical models of the cosmos. But here's what makes the Antikythera Mechanism so haunting: it shouldn't exist. The precision of its design is unmatched in antiquity. It contains 37 interlocking bronze gears, each cut with mathematical purpose to create an analog model of the heavens. Its calendar dials account for leap years, elliptical orbits, and the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which lunar phases recur on the same days. And it was housed not in a palace, but on a merchant ship, lost in a storm, forgotten for centuries. You peer at a replica now encased in glass. What remains of the original, sites in Athens fragmented into corroded clumps, but digitally reconstructed with X-rays and 3D scans. The new model spins with eerie grace. It's small, about the size of a shoebox, But its intelligence is massive. There's something unsettling about it, really. The fact that someone, perhaps several someones, figured out how to gear time. Not just tell it, shape it, map it, make a machine that simulates the sky like a music box plays a melody. And then, silence. Why don't we see more of these? Where are its siblings, its descendants? One theory. The Roman conquest of Greece scattered its scholars and destroyed much of its science. Another. The knowledge was considered sacred, passed secretly from one thinker to another, never widely published. And some whisper about fires, the Library of Alexandria, for instance. What did we lose when that ash took to the wind? But maybe the better question is, what didn't we lose? Because here's the astonishing part. The Antikythera Mechanism's mathematics and gearing weren't rediscovered until the 18th century. That's 1,800 years during which humanity forgot how to build what it once could. We like to think progress moves in a straight line, that we build on the past and keep moving forward. But history doesn't work that way. Sometimes we stumble, sometimes we forget, sometimes the ocean takes it back. And maybe that's why the mechanism matters so much. It's not just an object, it's a reminder that what we consider advanced isn't always modern, that genius isn't locked in our century, that somewhere on the deck of a doomed ship someone turned a dial, looked at the stars, and knew exactly where the moon would be in 5 years. You walk away from the model now, the gears still spinning in your imagination, and you wonder how much more like this was lost. Were there mechanical maps, water-powered computers, tools we'd barely recognize? And if there were, what were they for? It's easy to assume these things were scientific. But what if they were spiritual? What if the gears weren't just tracking time, but guiding rituals, harvests, marriages, coronations? A society that sees time not as a straight line, but as a spiral constantly looping, each turn connected to the last. In that sense, maybe the Antikythera Mechanism isn't about knowing the future. Maybe it's about syncing with it. You look up at the night sky now dotted with stars. Somewhere behind them, the earth tilts and turns, and the same forces that drove the mechanism still spin. And maybe that's the quiet comfort here, that even if we lose the machine, the rhythm remains. So let your thoughts rotate gently tonight. Let your dreams align with the heavens. Let the past and future tick like tiny bronze teeth, slow, deliberate, mysterious. Because the stars haven't forgotten, and maybe deep down neither have you. You're standing in a museum. The lights are dim, the cases quiet, the signs polite and careful. But in the corner, almost forgotten, is a small bronze object that shouldn't be there. It's perched on a glass shelf like a trinket. Harmless, but it hums with contradiction. This is the Baghdad Battery. At first glance, it looks unremarkable, just a clay jar about 5 inches tall. Inside, a rolled copper cylinder capped with asphalt. Inside that, a slender iron rod. That's it. No flashing lights, no glowing core, just a jar, a relic. But someone at some point decided to pour vinegar or lemon juice inside it. And that's where things get weird. Because if you do that, if you fill the jar with an acid, you get voltage, a tiny electric charge, enough to move a needle, enough perhaps to coat something in gold. It was discovered in the 1930s just outside of Baghdad in an area called Kujut Rabu, where ancient Parthian ruins had been excavated. The jar was dated to around 200 BCE, and for nearly a century now, it's divided historians, archaeologists, and electricians alike. Some say it's a battery, others say it's a fluke. Still, others claim it had ritual purposes, or was part of some unknown process involving alchemy, medicine, or metalwork. And here's the quiet problem: no one has found wires, or sockets, or user's manuals. Yet if it is a battery, then it predates Galvani and Volta by nearly 2,000 years. That's not just an historical hiccup, that's a technological outrage. Because batteries imply knowledge, not just of metals, but of chemistry, storage, and practical application. If the Parthians or whoever built this object understood electricity, even at a low level, then something big is missing from the timeline. Historians still argue. Some suggest the Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating, the process of applying a thin layer of gold or silver to another metal using electrical current. That theory gained steam in the 1970s when researchers successfully replicated the effect using similar materials. It worked. It actually worked. But no one has found electroplated artifacts from that period. No telltale signs, no gold-plated coins or jewelry to tie it all together. It's a possibility stranded in speculation. Others think the device may have had a spiritual purpose, that perhaps priests used the mild tingle of current during healing rituals to give the illusion of divine power, like touching the gods and feeling them touch back. And then there's the theory that haunts the edges of credibility, that this wasn't a lone device, but a fragment, one piece of a much larger system. That maybe buried beneath layers of silt and empire there once existed a lab or a temple or a workshop where electricity wasn't just discovered but used. If so, we've lost it entirely. No ruins, no texts, no blueprints, just this jar. You lean in now, nose nearly against the glass. The iron rod is dark with age. The asphalt stopper crumbles around the edges. But the craftsmanship is clean, deliberate. It wants to be understood. You imagine the hands that made it. Were they experimenting? Replicating an older model? Did they know the math or just the method? And why only one? Unless there are more waiting unrecognized, mislabeled, forgotten. There's something almost frustrating about the Baghdad Battery. It's like a riddle that's missing its question. Like finding a spark plug in a sand dune and wondering if the camel ever had an engine. But maybe that's the real lesson here. We underestimate the past. We assume ancient equals primitive, that clay pots belong to peasants and iron rods to war. But maybe the past wasn't a straight march forward. Maybe it looped. Maybe we reached peaks before and fell and forgot. Other ancient texts whisper of electrical phenomena. The Egyptians wrote of sacred energy. The Indians spoke of Vajra, the lightning weapon of the gods. In Babylon, temples were said to crackle with unseen power. Coincidence pattern? Or just our need to project familiarity onto the past? You step back now. The hum is in your head. The glow comes from your own curiosity. But the jar is still there, still asking. And here's what no textbook will tell you: whether or not the Baghdad Battery was real. In the way we understand batteries today, it is real in another sense. It represents the possibility of forgotten brilliance. The chance that somewhere someone figured out something they couldn't explain. That maybe long ago we weren't just surviving, we were experimenting, reaching, charging, innovating. You walk away from the case. The light dims. Your footsteps fade. But you carry the spark with you. Because that's the strange thing about electricity. It doesn't care who discovered it first. It just waits. Quiet, patient, like knowledge, like truth, like the soft, persistent current of mystery, still humming beneath the silence of the ancient world. You're in a dusty back room of an Egyptian museum, or at least it feels like it. The walls here are filled with half-catalogued relics, forgotten oddities, and misunderstood fragments of ancient lives. And right there, tucked behind a worn wooden case not far from the taxidermied ibis and a pile of shattered Ushabti figurines, is a delicate little object that shouldn't exist. A bird, or something like it. Not carved in lifelike detail, no feathers or claws, but smooth, symmetrical, and strangely aerodynamic. This is the Saqqara Bird. It was found in 1898 in a tomb near Saqqara, Egypt, an ancient burial ground near the great city of Memphis. Dated to roughly 200 BCE, the little bird is made of sycamore wood, has a wingspan of about 7 inches, and weighs just under an ounce. It looks at first glance like a child's toy, but the more you look at it, the more the questions begin. Because it doesn't have the characteristics of any known bird, its wings are flat and level, like modern airplane wings, not swept back like most avian profiles. Its body is streamlined. Its tail, strangely, is vertical, like a rudder. And here's the kicker: it has no feet, no perching claws, no functional base. This thing was never meant to stand still. Which raises a peculiar possibility. Was it meant to fly? Historians still argue. Mainstream Egyptologists categorize the Saqqara bird as a ceremonial object, possibly a symbol of the soul, or Ba, which was often represented as a bird in ancient Egyptian culture. It may have served a spiritual role placed in tombs to guide the deceased in the afterlife. Perfectly plausible. But then came the aerodynamicists. In the 1970s, Dr. Khalil Messiha, an Egyptian physician with a passion for flight theory, proposed something controversial: that the Saqqara bird was a model glider, and that it implied the ancient Egyptians had some understanding of flight dynamics. His claim sparked a flurry of debate. Supporters built scaled-up replicas of the bird using modern materials and tested them in wind tunnels. The results: surprising. The model flew and did so with impressive stability. Then came refinements. When the tail section was modified, replacing the flat rudder-like shape with a horizontal stabilizer, the model performed even better, gliding over significant distances. Could this have been an ancient experiment, a prototype, or perhaps a symbolic representation of flight knowledge passed down or inspired by something older still? Skeptics argue the flying tests prove little. Any number of objects can be made to fly if tweaked enough, and there's no surviving text, no mention of flying machines in Egyptian records, no hangars, no blueprints, just this bird. But the fringe theories persist. Some believe the Saqqara bird was a scaled-down replica of a much larger object, a glider perhaps made from linen and reed, launched from temple heights or cliffs during rituals. Others suggest it reflects ancient memories of flight, maybe passed down from earlier forgotten civilizations, or even encounters with aerial phenomena lost to history. One theory, bordering on myth, proposes the Saqqara bird is evidence of ancient knowledge of lift and drag, basic principles of flight not officially understood until the work of pioneers like Da Vinci and the Wright brothers. Could the Egyptians have stumbled on these ideas purely by observation, watching birds playing with kites, designing wind toys? It's possible. They were no strangers to complex engineering. They aligned pyramids with stellar precision, constructed vast irrigation systems, and knew how to preserve bodies for millennia. A culture like that might well have dabbled in flight, not necessarily for transportation, but for symbolism. After all, flight is freedom, transcendence, the soul rising. It's little wonder so many ancient cultures, from the Chinese to the Greeks to the Mesopotamians, included flying machines in their myths. But what if just once those myths were remembered, not invented? You hold the thought in your hand now, imagining the moment 2,000 years ago when someone, an artisan, a priest, maybe even a child, held this object aloft and threw it. Maybe it soared, maybe it didn't. But the idea, the dream of flight, was already there. That's what the Saqqara bird represents most clearly: curiosity, the desire to rise above, to mimic the ibis, the falcon, the heron, to join Horus in the sky. You step back into the warmth of the tomb corridor now, light flickering across painted walls. You see birds everywhere, drawn in graceful arcs, feathers detailed with care, wings outstretched toward the stars. And you wonder, was this bird meant to guide the soul, or was it a whisper of a technology too bold to survive, one that rose briefly and vanished into the sand? There are no answers waiting at the end of this section, just that feeling in your chest, that lift. The idea that maybe, just maybe, history isn't grounded, that every so often it takes flight. And tonight, as you lie still and quiet, let yourself feel that motion. Let your thoughts glide on the updrafts of wonder. Let your dreams carry you to temples that touch the sky and tombs where wooden wings wait. Because in the ancient silence of Egypt, one little bird still soars. It's round, it's smooth, it's carved in stone, and it has no business being there. Tonight you're holding something called a Dropa Stone. Or maybe you're just imagining it, because these objects and the legends around them are as slippery as the stone itself. Let's go back to 1938 in the mountains of Bayan Har, on the border of China and Tibet. A Chinese archaeologist named Chipu Te reportedly led an expedition into the isolated caves of the Bayan Karaula range. Inside the caves, he and his team claimed to discover dozens of small thin stone discs, each about 1 foot in diameter, with a perfect hole in the center and spiral grooves etched from the center outward like the grooves on a vinyl record. So far it sounds like an archaeological curiosity. But then came the interpretation. When the grooves were examined allegedly under a microscope, they were said to be tiny, nearly microscopic carvings, not just decorative, but writing. Hundreds of hieroglyph-like characters spiraling out along the disc. And the message. According to later translations, these grooves told the story of the Dropa, a people not from Earth, but from the stars. They crash-landed, the story goes, thousands of years ago. Stranded, they tried to coexist with the local people, but were met with fear, conflict, and isolation. Eventually they died out, or perhaps left. And these discs were left behind, etched with their history. A memory in stone. It's a wild claim, and one that's drawn enormous skepticism. Most mainstream archaeologists have never seen these stones. No credible museum houses them. The original cave site has never been officially confirmed. The names involved Chipu Te Tsum Nui and others appear inconsistently in records. Some researchers believe the entire story may be a hoax, crafted from Cold War-era anxieties and sci-fi pulp imagination. But here's where it gets weird again. There are references scattered across time to similar artifacts. Stone discs with center holes have been found in China, Nepal, Tibet, and even parts of Africa, sometimes used as wheels, sometimes in burial rituals, but always with an air of ambiguity. Are these ceremonial objects tools? Ancient data storage? One Dropa stone was reportedly tested in the 1960s and found to contain unusually high levels of cobalt and other metals. It also supposedly emitted a faint electric charge when placed on a conductive surface. That's not how stone is supposed to behave. And yet, if even a fraction of this is true, if one disc is real, if one translation is honest, then the implications are staggering. It would mean that our history isn't just earthbound. That somewhere in the deep shadows of our past, there were visitors, encounters, collaborations, or tragedies that never made it into textbooks. But even if none of that is true, even if the Dropa stones are just smooth rocks with clever stories, they're still part of a larger pattern. We find objects like this everywhere, artifacts that don't fit, that don't belong, that whisper about a world before memory. Not every whisper is evidence, but they do tend to cluster in the same places. High mountains, deep caves, forgotten tombs. You look down at the stone in your hands. It's not glowing, it's not humming, but it is whispering. Whispering about language, about the need to remember to carve a message that might outlast time, weather, and war. And that's something deeply human, even if it turns out to be entirely terrestrial. Because maybe we've always felt like visitors on this planet, always felt the sky pulling at our thoughts, always wondered who came before and who might come after. And if you think about it, spirals are a fitting shape for memory, for time, for knowledge. They don't run straight. They curl inward or outward and always draw you closer to something unseen. Historians still argue whether the Dropa stones ever existed, but the stories they inspired, those are very real. They've made their way into documentaries, science fiction, conspiracy forums, and late-night campfire tales. They've been compared to vinyl records, computer discs, and even stargates. They remind us that we don't just seek truth, we also seek meaning. You find a flat rock nearby. You trace a spiral with your fingertip. The air is still. Somewhere in the distance, the mountains rise mute, unblinking. You imagine a ship falling from the stars, a people learning how to breathe here, to write, to grieve, and then to disappear, but not without leaving a note. Tonight, whether the Dropa were real or imagined, let their story be your story, a reminder that every mystery begins not with proof, but with wonder, and that sometimes the best questions are the ones we never fully answer. Let the spiral turn. Let your thoughts drift outward like ripples across a still lake. Sleep now surrounded by stars, by stories, by stone discs spinning in silence, waiting for the right listener. Maybe that's you. You're walking along a dusty riverbank when something catches your eye, half buried in the clay, smoothed by centuries of wind and rain. It's dark, oddly shaped, and heavy in your hand. You brush away the dirt. It's a hammer, and not just any hammer. A hammer encased in stone. This is the London Hammer, a mystery wrapped in iron and silence. It was reportedly discovered in 1936 near London, Texas, not London, England, by a couple out for a walk. They found it protruding from a nodule of rock partially exposed in a dried-up creek bed. When geologists examined the surrounding stone, they estimated its age at around 400 million years. That's pre-dinosaur, pre-mammal, pre-bird. So, what's a human-made iron hammer doing inside rock that predates the first vertebrates ever to crawl onto land? Let's start with what we know. The hammer is about 6 inches long, with a wooden handle partially fossilized, and a metal head made of over 96% iron, mixed with small amounts of chlorine and sulfur. That's unusually pure, far purer than the iron produced by 19th century forges, and oddly resistant to rust. It's heavy, durable, feels right in your hand, like it's waiting for work. But that's the paradox. This thing was found inside a rock. The surrounding stone appears to be Ordovician, a geologic period from roughly 400 to 500 million years ago. And that's where the confusion begins. Geologists still argue. Some say the rock isn't truly Ordovician, but rather concretion, a type of sedimentary buildup that can form rapidly around an object in the right conditions, kind of like a pearl forming around a grain of sand. In this view, the hammer may only be a couple hundred years old, accidentally fossilized by mineral-rich waters. Others, more skeptical, point out that the hammer's provenance isn't scientifically airtight. It wasn't documented by a trained archaeologist. The rock formation around it wasn't observed in situ in its original location, making it hard to determine age with certainty. But the story refuses to go away, because it taps into a deeper fear, a deeper curiosity. That our timeline, the clean linear line we're taught in school, might be wrong. That humans, or something very much like us, may have existed before the fossil record says we could. And if so, what happened to them? That's the haunting part. The London Hammer isn't alone. There are other so-called anomalous artifacts that seem to exist out of time. Carvings in coal, screws in quartz, footprints fossilized next to dinosaurs. Most of these have been explained, debunked, or dismissed. But even if 99 out of 100 are misinterpretations, what about the one? What if one of them is real? Imagine that for a second. That deep beneath the layers of sediment and time, there was once another rise of intelligence. One that mined ore-shaped tools built, lived and vanished, leaving behind only a whisper. A hammer sealed in stone. And here's the strange part. It wouldn't be the first time the Earth has reset. Mass extinctions have happened 5 times in Earth's history. Entire ecosystems wiped clean from asteroid impacts to volcanic winters. So who's to say an early civilization, pre-human, post-human, or just off-record, couldn't have flourished and fallen long before we arrived? The hammer says nothing. It just sits there, heavy, closed-lipped. But it invites the question, and maybe that's its purpose, not to answer, but to open. Even the metallurgy is curious. A 96% iron alloy that's resistant to corrosion, allegedly formed in a time before we believed such smelting was possible. Some metallurgists have questioned the ratio. Others say it could occur under certain forging techniques, but such techniques shouldn't have been around in the 1800s, or the 1800 BCs, or 180 million BC. So either we've got a modern hammer inside an ancient stone by accident, or we've got a relic from an impossible age. You sit with that thought now. You can hear the wind blowing across dry rock, the occasional chirp of a distant bird, but mostly you hear the silence. The kind that comes when something doesn't fit and no one wants to talk about it. It's not about believing in ancient astronauts or time-traveling blacksmiths. It's about realizing that our story, the human story, is still being written, still full of holes, still capable of surprises. And sometimes a surprise looks like a hammer stuck in a rock. You close your eyes, you imagine the builder, a craftsman maybe, or a wanderer, someone strong, quiet, patient. He sets the tool down to rest. The rains come, the floods, the silt, the years. He never picks it up again, until you do. And now that quiet question lies heavy in your hand. What else have we forgotten? Sleep well tonight with that mystery by your side. Let it anchor you not in fear, but in wonder. In the gentle awareness that the past is far stranger, deeper, and older than we're ever comfortable admitting. And that maybe, just maybe, we've barely begun to scratch the surface. Tonight we light a lamp that should never have existed. It's hidden in the back walls of an ancient Egyptian temple, carved above the heads of forgotten gods, in a place where only priests and the dead were ever meant to look. And yet there it is, etched in relief on stone, a bulb, a filament, even a coiled wire. Or at least, that's what it looks like. This is the mystery of the Dendera Light. Found in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, the carving has fueled decades of speculation, confusion, and midnight arguments among fringe historians and mainstream scholars alike. Let's start with what we see. The image depicts a group of figures standing around what appears to be a large bulb-shaped object. Inside the bulb is a coiled snake, often interpreted as the filament, and the bulb is connected by a thick cable to a base shaped like a jed pillar, which was associated with stability and the spine of Osiris in Egyptian mythology. To many observers, it looks like a kind of ancient light bulb. More than one researcher has drawn comparisons to the Crookes tube or Geisler tube, 19th century forerunners of the modern light bulb, which used vacuum tubes and electrical current to produce illumination. So, did the ancient Egyptians know about electricity? Historians still argue. Mainstream Egyptologists firmly reject the electrical interpretation. They point out that the carving is part of a religious tableau, a symbolic scene representing the creation myth and the divine energy of the gods. The serpent, they say, is a symbol of fertility and rebirth, not a glowing wire. According to this view, the Dendera image is deeply mythological, not technological. But others aren't so sure. They point to the lack of soot in deep temple chambers, places where torches would have left residue if they were used as the primary light source. Some ancient sites have high ceilings and narrow corridors impossible to illuminate without mirrors, and yet no mirror system has ever been recovered. And then there's the Baghdad Battery, which we explored earlier. Could a small electric charge have been used to light phosphorescent gases in sealed tubes? Could the Egyptians have had rudimentary illumination, just enough to sketch paint and build in the darkest corners of their temples? It's a tempting thought. Some replicas of the Dendera Light have been built using modern materials and Tesla coils to recreate the visual effect. And they work, sort of. They emit a soft blue glow enough to light up a room. But even if this wasn't a literal bulb, why does it look so much like one? Maybe that's the bigger question. What we see in ancient art isn't always what the artist meant. We see machines because we know machines. We see electricity because we use it daily. But ancient minds didn't think like ours. Their metaphors were sacred. Their art layered in symbolism. Still the resemblance is uncanny. And you have to wonder, could both interpretations be true? Could the Dendera Light be symbolic of divine energy, but based on something technological that the priests remembered, misunderstood, or ritualized? Was it something they saw, or something they imagined and tried to draw with the tools they had. We forget how often invention follows myth. Da Vinci imagined flight by watching birds and sketching angels. The first rockets borrowed from stories of sky chariots and fire gods. Perhaps this image, this glowing coil, was their way of gesturing towards something just out of reach. You walk down the temple corridor now, past the columns and lotus-headed capitals. The air is cool, still, silent. A beam of sunlight catches the carving. The serpent glows. You're not sure what it means. No one is. But you can feel it. This isn't just about technology. It's about the intersection of magic and science, faith and function, art and engineering. The Egyptians believed the world was born in darkness, and that light was sacred, divine, unstable, powerful. They built temples to capture that moment, to preserve the dawn of everything. And maybe that's what the Dendera Light really is. Not a tool, but a memory. Of brightness in a dark place. Of understanding in the shadows. Of something once known and now forgotten. Because that's what light really does, it reveals. It shows us what was always there, but hidden. And sometimes it shows us things we don't yet know how to explain. You stand there a while watching the stone, letting your thoughts flicker like candle flames. Let your breath slow. Let your mind go dim like a temple hall waiting for the spark. And as you fall into sleep, imagine that first moment when a room is filled with light. Not fire, not flame, but something silent, soft, serpentine, waiting to be remembered. You step carefully through the ruins of an ancient city in southern Mesopotamia. The sun glints off sand-polished bricks. Every corner hums with a silence too thick to be empty. And just beneath the earth, waiting quietly for thousands of years, are creatures that shouldn't exist. Not in clay, not in art, and definitely not in history. They're the Ubaid Lizardmen. This mystery begins with the Ubaid culture, a pre-Sumerian civilization that thrived in Mesopotamia around 5000 to 4000 BCE, well before writing pyramids or even the first dynastic kings. The Ubaid left behind settlements, pottery tools, and temples. But they also left something much stranger. In the ancient site of Al-Ubaid, near modern-day Iraq, archaeologists unearthed a set of terracotta figurines unlike anything else in Mesopotamian art. These weren't stylized humans or gods. These were reptilian, slender bodies, elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, slits for mouths. And most unsettling of all, some of them were wearing helmets, holding scepters, or nursing infants. If they had been discovered in an Aztec pyramid or an alien museum, they might not have felt so jarring. But here, among the earliest agriculturalists and temple builders of history, they feel like an interruption, a glitch. And just like that, the questions begin. Were these statues meant to represent gods, priests in ceremonial masks, or something else entirely, something otherworldly? Historians still argue. Mainstream scholars suggest the figurines are religious symbols, perhaps tied to fertility rituals, ancestral spirits, or mythic protectors. The lizard-like features, they say, might represent stylized artistic choices, exaggerations of features seen in crocodiles, snakes, or even symbolic animals revered in myth. But there's a counter-theory, a bolder one. Some believe these figurines represent actual beings, entities encountered or remembered by the Ubaid people, ancient astronauts perhaps, reptilian visitors, creatures that came from elsewhere and made an impression so profound, so unsettling, that they were immortalized in clay. It sounds like science fiction, but then again, what doesn't? We're talking about a society that predated even the Sumerians. They built irrigation systems, constructed multi-room houses, and developed complex temple platforms. Their ceramics were decorated with intricate geometric patterns. Their settlements were organized and clean. These weren't primitive villagers. They were pioneers. And in the middle of all that order came the Lizardmen. There are only a few of these figurines in existence, perhaps a dozen known today. That scarcity only deepens the mystery. Were they rare ceremonial objects, part of a now-lost religious class, or the remnants of a censored mythology erased by later cultures? What's more, no written records remain from the Ubaid people. We have no myths, no songs, no prayers, just these statues and silence. It's tempting to connect the Ubaid Lizardmen to the wider web of reptilian myths, from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of Mesoamerica, to the Nagas of Hindu mythology, snake beings who lived beneath the earth and taught wisdom. Even in modern conspiracy lore, the idea of intelligent reptilian beings surfaces again and again. Coincidence? Archetypal memory? Or something older? You kneel beside one of the statues now. Its surface is cracked, its eyes half-lidded. It holds a baby delicately like a mother. But the face is cold, detached, reptilian. What did the Ubaid people see? Were they expressing a psychological truth that parenthood, death, and the cosmos are mysterious and inhuman? Or were they expressing a literal one, that the world around them included creatures we can't explain? The truth may be lost forever, but the unease remains. You imagine a dusty evening 7,000 years ago. A fire burns low. A potter shapes a figure with trembling hands. Not for beauty, not for sale, but because they must. Because something inside their memory or their story demanded to be made visible. A creature, a visitor, a god. And so they made it, not to last forever, but long enough. Long enough for you to find it. Long enough for you to sit here all these centuries later, wondering what we've forgotten and why we keep digging for it. You look up from the clay. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the ruins. And for a second, one of them looks like it's standing. Just standing there, watching, waiting, and then it's gone. You take a breath. You're not alone in this world. That's not a warning, it's a comfort. Because mystery, after all, is just a space where your mind can rest. A place where answers don't matter as much as the questions. Let the lizardmen remain a riddle. Let them guard the silence. Let them remind you that not everything old is explainable, and not everything strange is wrong. Some things, like dreams, like myths, like stone figurines in desert dust, are just meant to be held turned over gently, and then set down again. Sleep easy tonight, knowing the past still whispers. And sometimes it hisses. It's sitting in a museum case behind thick glass, slightly tilted on a padded display, the light just barely catching the faint shimmer of ancient carvings. You could miss it if you weren't paying attention. A humble-looking bowl, shallow, heavy, weathered with time. Its base is uneven, the rim chipped. But look closer, and something strange begins to emerge. The writing, no, the script on its inside surface, isn't Sumerian, isn't Quechua, isn't anything we can comfortably classify. And beside that writing, cuneiform. This is the Fuente Magna bowl, sometimes called the Rosetta Stone of the Americas. And it shouldn't exist. The bowl was reportedly discovered in the 1950s near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, on a private hacienda outside the city of La Paz. Local farmers found it buried in the soil, not far from other pre-Columbian artifacts. But this one was different. Etched into its clay are symbols that to some observers resemble Sumerian cuneiform. That's right, writing from ancient Mesopotamia, somehow appearing thousands of miles away in the high-altitude heart of South America. The first response, surely a forgery. But the bowl's surface showed weathering consistent with age, and the context found among other genuine Andean artifacts added weight to the mystery. The inscriptions were examined by Clyde Winters, an independent researcher who believes the symbols to be a mix of Proto-Sumerian and Proto-Elamite script languages used in ancient Iraq over 5,000 years ago. According to his interpretation, the writing refers to a fertility goddess and a ritual dedication. But here's the catch. There's no record, none at all, of Sumerians traveling to South America. No ships, no trade routes, no temples. So how did the writing get there? Historians still argue. Mainstream scholars overwhelmingly reject the Fuente Magna Bowl as either a hoax or a misidentification. They point to the poor documentation of its discovery, the lack of peer-reviewed analysis, and the general unreliability of linguistic comparisons made outside of academic rigor. Fair points. And yet, this isn't the only out-of-place artifact in the Andes. Stone monoliths at Tiwanaku, bizarre megaliths in Pumapunku, and artifacts with old-world features continue to confuse and fascinate researchers. Some fringe theorists suggest ancient transoceanic contact was more common than we realize, that long before Columbus, before the Polynesians, before the Vikings, there were voyagers who crossed oceans and shared fragments of culture. The evidence is always fragmentary. A glyph here, a sculpture there, a bowl in the dirt. But that bowl holds weight, not because it proves anything conclusively, but because it asks so many good questions. What if writing itself, arguably the most powerful technology of civilization, wasn't confined to river valleys in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus? What if the knowledge of script traveled further earlier and stranger than we allow? Or what if this bowl is a message not from Sumeria, but from a lost civilization that both the old and new worlds once touched? It wouldn't be the first time two ancient traditions mirrored each other. The pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica, the myth of the flood in both Babylon and the Andes, the concept of sacred mountains, cosmic serpents, and sky gods wielding thunder. Even without direct contact, civilizations often reflect each other in uncanny ways. So perhaps the bowl doesn't mean that Sumerians sailed to Bolivia. Perhaps it means that writing, or at least the idea of inscribing sacred meaning onto sacred vessels, emerged in more places than we once thought. Perhaps language wants to be carved, shared, and remembered. And maybe this bowl is just a beautiful coincidence. But as you look at it again, you feel that tremble of recognition. Those carved symbols, spirals, slashes, shapes pull at something in you. A memory you didn't know you had. A whisper from a time when people looked at clay and thought, "This should outlast me." That's what the Fuente Magna Bowl really is. A plea. A reach across time. Whether written in Sumerian or something we've never named, the message is the same. Don't forget us. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine that bowl nestled in the earth for centuries. The rains coming, the roots curling around it, the stories waiting. And then, impossibly, your hand brushes the soil. You pick it up, and the past speaks again. Not in perfect grammar or official inscriptions, but in symbols carved with care. By someone long gone who believed someone like you would someday find it. Let that be enough for tonight. Let mystery wrap around you like a soft blanket, warm and heavy. Let the questions swirl like script in the dark. Let your dreams drift backward across oceans and ruins to a bowl etched with wonder. And let yourself sleep knowing that even forgotten stories can still be found. You're in a cold, dusty room now, not one made of stone, but of secrets, of uncertainty. The glass display in front of you glints under museum lighting, but what it holds seems to pull in shadows rather than reflect them. A book, or something like one. Its pages are yellowed vellum, its text utterly unrecognizable. Not Greek, not Latin, not Arabic, not anything you've ever seen. It's not just unreadable, it's undecipherable. This is the Voynich Manuscript, perhaps the most famous unreadable book in the world. Named after Wilfrid Voynich, the Polish-American book dealer who purchased it in 1912, the manuscript is now housed in the Beinecke Rare Book Library at Yale University. It dates to the early 15th century, based on radiocarbon dating of the parchment. But the mysteries surrounding it are much older and much deeper. Let's start with the obvious. No one can read it. The manuscript is written in an unknown script, composed of looping characters, odd ligatures, and symbols that seem to obey rules, but not rules we understand. Linguists, cryptographers, and codebreakers from World War II to modern AI labs have tried and failed to crack it. And yet, the writing seems structured, organized. It has punctuation repetition patterns and internal consistency. Whatever the Voynich manuscript is, it doesn't look like gibberish. That alone is enough to drive someone mad. But that's just the beginning. The manuscript contains over 200 pages of illustrated content divided into what appear to be 6 major sections. Botanical, pages filled with plants, many of which are completely unknown to modern science. Astronomical, star charts, zodiac signs, and strange celestial diagrams. Biological, bizarre flowing diagrams of naked women bathing in greenish fluids, connected by tubes and channels like some kind of anatomical fantasy. Cosmological, fold-out pages filled with spirals, stars, and nested circles. Pharmaceutical, jars, roots, leaves, and containers, again filled with unknown substances. Recipes, short paragraphs next to star-like symbols, perhaps ingredients or instructions. It feels like a book of knowledge, but written in the language of another world. Historians still argue. Some believe it's a hoax, a clever forgery crafted to fool Renaissance collectors who prized arcane, unreadable books. Others think it's a code, perhaps concealing dangerous medical knowledge or heretical ideas. Still others suggest it was a kind of mental exercise, a private fantasy language used by a single author to explore their imagination. Then there are the fringe theories, that the manuscript was given to humanity by extraterrestrials, that it's the diary of a witch encoded to keep her secrets safe, that it's the surviving record of a lost civilization written in a language no longer spoken. AI algorithms have been trained on the script. Pattern-matching tools have compared it to known alphabets. Phonetic models have tried to sound out the syllables. Nothing sticks. Nothing unlocks the door. And yet, the longer you look, the more it feels like it should make sense. Like your brain is trying to remember something it never learned. Like the Voynich manuscript is whispering in a dream language just on the edge of comprehension. You flip through the pages in your mind. Here's a plant that doesn't exist, but feels like it could. Here's a diagram of women dancing in some kind of ritual bath connected by tubes. Are they healing, transforming, journeying? Here's a sun surrounded by text in loops. A calendar, maybe, or a spell. And here's the truth. Even if we never decode it, the Voynich manuscript is already doing its job. It's reminding us that not all knowledge is meant to be convenient. Some truths arrive wrapped in metaphor. Some are never translated, only felt. And maybe that's what the manuscript was always meant to be, not a reference book, but a mirror. A mirror that reflects your own need to understand, to organize, to decode. A mirror that reminds you there are still rooms in the human mind we haven't explored. You imagine the author now, quill in hand, candle flickering, writing with patience, love, and purpose. They weren't trying to confuse you. They were trying to remember something too, or preserve something, or create something entirely new. You can almost hear the scratch of the pen on parchment. You can almost feel the quiet smile of someone who knew even back then that mystery was its own kind of magic. Because here's the strangest part. In all the confusion, all the decoding attempts, all the theories, one feeling rises again and again among those who study the Voynich manuscript. Calm. It doesn't feel sinister or aggressive. It feels gentle, curious, intimate, like a bedtime story from another planet. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, let that story be yours. Let those looping letters spiral softly in your imagination. Let those impossible plants bloom in the garden of your dreams. No need to understand. Just feel the pages turn. Feel the mystery wrap around you like a velvet cloak. Let yourself drift into the manuscript's quiet world where logic loosens symbols, dance, and everything strange is safe. You're standing in front of a book again, but this time it doesn't whisper. It glares, heavy, stark, blocky in style. Its letters jagged and thick like something carved rather than written. Its pages stiff, ominous, like a manuscript written not in ink, but in warning. This is the Rohonc Codex, and if the Voynich manuscript is a lullaby sung in an alien language, The Rohonc is more like a riddle wrapped in a threat. No one knows where it came from. It surfaced in the early 19th century in Hungary, part of the private collection of Count Gustav Batthyány. When he donated his library to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in 1838, the Rohonc Codex came with it, an unlabeled, unsettling addition to history's unsolvable puzzles. The codex is written in an unknown script composed of hundreds of unique characters, far more than any known alphabet. Some characters repeat, some vary only slightly, and all of them are arranged with maddening consistency. But there's more than writing. The Rohonc is illustrated. Over 80 pages are adorned with miniature images of people, scenes of war worship, farming, judgment, sacrifice. The figures are dressed in robes and armor, holding spears, and books, kneeling before strange symbols or being punished for unknown crimes. The religious imagery seems familiar at first glance, but is it Christian Islamic? Something else entirely. Historians still argue. Some believe the Rohonc Codex is a hoax, a 19th century fabrication meant to confuse or impress. But others argue the consistency of the script and the complexity of the imagery suggest a real unknown language, perhaps Hungarian runes, a forgotten dialect, or a personal cipher lost to time. A Hungarian scholar named Ferenc Toldi once proposed it was written in a right-to-left script, a theory bolstered by the direction of the illustrations. Others have tried frequency analysis, hoping to match symbol patterns to known languages. Still, the code remains unbroken. And unlike the Voynich, the Rohonc Codex feels heavier. There's something in the art, something sharp-edged and cold, a sense of moral reckoning maybe, of a culture documenting itself in the face of collapse, or a warning from a world that no longer exists. It doesn't ask to be deciphered, it dares you to. And then there's the question of religion. Some images seem clearly Christian: crosses, baptism-like rituals, robed figures in prayer. Others suggest Islamic motifs, crescent shapes, minaret-like towers. A few even resemble Hindu or Zoroastrian iconography. So which is it? Was this the record of a syncretic religion? A belief system that fused multiple traditions into something we've never seen before? Or was it an intentional enigma? A sacred text meant only for the initiated, designed to be unintelligible to outsiders. There's no context, no introduction, no glossary, just page after page of silent insistence. You do not belong here. But maybe you do, because even in its severity, the Rohonc Codex has a strange pull, a dark warmth. It's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect something, something precious, something ancient, a way of seeing the world that couldn't survive. You imagine the writer now, seated by candlelight, working through the night not to deceive, but to preserve, to keep something sacred from falling into the wrong hands. Maybe this wasn't meant to be read by us. Maybe it was meant to be remembered. A language built for silence, a story too dangerous for words, and yet it exists. The pages turn. You see warriors kneeling in front of shrines. You see fields of battle and scenes of judgment. You see kings and prisoners, gods and men blurring into each other across worn parchment. And then you see a blank page, and for a second you understand. Maybe this wasn't meant to be decoded. Maybe it was meant to stand guard, like a monument, like a tombstone, not explaining what was lost, but making sure we don't forget that something was. The Rohonc Codex holds no answers, only presence. Like a friend you can't quite understand sitting beside you in the dark. You don't need to know its name. You just need to know it's there. And tonight, that's enough. Because mystery is not always about solving. Sometimes it's about honoring the unknown, letting it exist, letting it keep its shape. So sleep now. Let the strange script drift across your dreams like dark ribbons. Let the miniature warriors and praying monks march softly across your thoughts. Let the codex close, but not disappear. It has waited long enough. Let it keep watching, quietly, from the shelf of forgotten wisdom. and may you wake tomorrow with a question still burning gently in your mind. What else have we not yet remembered? You're holding a disc now. It fits neatly into your palms, about the size of a small plate, its edges worn but intact. Its surface is smooth and golden brown, like baked clay left to cool under a Minoan sun. At first, it seems unremarkable, and then you tilt it. Spiraling from the center, moving outward in a perfect curve, is a sequence of stamped symbols, 241 in total, grouped into 45 segments. Each symbol was pressed, not carved. Each one unique. Each one a mystery. This is the Phaistos Disc, and to this day no one knows what it says. Discovered in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier at the Minoan Palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete, the disc was found buried in a basement room alongside fragments of a linear A tablet, a writing system that itself remains undeciphered. The disc is made of fired clay and measures about 15 centimeters in diameter. On both sides, it's covered in a spiral of stamped pictographic signs, humans, birds, fish, plants, tools, abstract symbols. The first thing you notice, it's beautiful. The second, it's utterly alone. Because here's the truth. No other artifact like it has ever been found. Historians still argue. Some believe the disc represents the world's earliest known example of movable type printing, since the symbols appear to have been impressed with individual stamps before firing. That would make the Minoans accidental printers centuries before Gutenberg ever touched a press. But printing what? A poem, a hymn, a magical incantation? No one can say. The symbols don't match linear A or linear B, the two major writing systems used in Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations. They seem to be part of a unique writing system used only once, or perhaps used more broadly, but lost completely, save this one example. Theories abound. Some scholars suggest it's a religious text, perhaps a prayer to a goddess. Others believe it's a game board, a kind of ritual puzzle. Still others think it's a genealogy, a story of kings or ancestors spiraling outward like the branches of a myth. And then there are the more colorful ideas, that it's a message from Atlantis, a Minoan copy of a language from a now-lost continent, that it's a code of cosmic origin encoding planetary movements or sacred geometry, that it's not from Crete at all, but was brought there, left behind by travelers who never returned. You run your fingers along the spiraling symbols. They feel intentional, rhythmic. A man walking, a fish, a floral bloom, a shield, a saw, a feather, a child. Are they sounds, words, ideas? Or something older, something beyond phonetics? Maybe this was meant to be spoken aloud only once in ceremony. Maybe it was meant to remain silent forever. A prayer pressed into clay, never meant to return. You imagine the maker now, not an author, but a priest, or a child, or a scribe who had no one left to write for. Someone who stamped each symbol with care, with certainty, with hope, and then buried it. Why? Some suggest it was hidden during a crisis, an invasion, a fire, an earthquake. Others think it was sacrificed to the gods, placed under the earth as an offering, and yet here it is. Not destroyed, not lost, preserved, waiting. The Phaistos Disc sits at the crossroads of form and enigma. It is art, it is code, it is sound in a frozen spiral, a message circling forever outward and inward at the same time. You stand now in the dim half-light of history, holding it, turning it slowly, noticing how every culture leaves behind something small and round. A coin, a plate, a wheel, a seal, a moon. And maybe that's what the disc is. A moon etched with thoughts, orbiting us through time, distant, cold, beautiful. It hums a language we don't yet know how to hear. But you're listening now, and in your quiet room, as you lie back and let your mind drift, the symbols begin to pulse. Not with translation, but with rhythm, with cadence. They become a lullaby, a spiral song, a story that doesn't need words, because sometimes a mystery doesn't need solving. It needs honoring. And this disc, this silent spinning disc, it has waited thousands of years for you to notice it. Not to crack it, not to name it, just to feel its weight, its message, its presence. So let it spin in your dreams tonight. Let its spiral carry you gently outward. Let the symbols blur into each other like stars across the Aegean sky. Let the questions remain, and let sleep take you turning slowly, wordlessly into the night. You approach the monument slowly, not because it's difficult to see, but because your eyes keep telling you it shouldn't matter, just another old sculpture in a green English garden. But your mind disagrees. It senses something else, something off, something deeply, quietly unsolved. Carved into stone and standing within the grounds of Shugborough Hall in Staffordshire, England, is a curious relief sculpture, an 18th century pastoral scene, showing a group of figures mimicking Nicolas Poussin's painting, The Shepherds of Arcadia. At first glance, it's charming. Then you notice the inscription. Etched into the stone below the sculpture are 10 capital letters, O-U-O-S-V-A-V-V, with D and M flanking them on either side. No date, no signature, no clue. Just that. This is the Shugborough Inscription, and for over 250 years, no one has been able to say with certainty what those letters mean. Historians, cryptographers, poets, codebreakers, even famous minds like Charles Darwin and Alan Turing have tried to crack the mystery. No one has succeeded. It's not for lack of trying. Theories range from the plausible to the fantastical. Some say it's a Latin acrostic where each letter stands for a word. Others believe it's an initialism, a religious or poetic phrase encoded for privacy. One hypothesis suggests it might be connected to the Knights Templar hidden knowledge encoded for future generations. Others think it could be a love message between the monument's commissioner Thomas Anson and his brother Admiral George Anson. One popular speculative reading, Optime Uxoris. Optime sororis, viduus, amantissimus, vovit virtutibus. Best of wives, best of sisters, a most devoted widower dedicates this to your virtues. Touching but not provable. The monument itself dates to the mid-1700s and was likely designed with input from the artist Peter Shoemakers and possibly influenced by esoteric circles. But here's the strange part: why go through the trouble to encode such a deeply private message in such a public way? And why copy Poussin's painting of Arcadia, a place long associated with hidden wisdom, death, and utopia? Let's go deeper. The original painting, Et in Arcadia Ego, shows shepherds discovering a tomb, suggesting that even in paradise, Arcadia death is present. Some interpret it as a reflection on mortality. Others believe it's a nod to something buried literally or symbolically. Now layer that onto the Shugborough Monument. Here you have a mysterious pastoral scene with a cryptic message carved beneath it. On the estate of a man known to have ties to secret societies, travels to the East, and a deep interest in classical and esoteric thought. It begins to feel less like a memorial and more like a puzzle. But for what purpose? Historians still argue. Some claim it's all a coincidence, a series of poetic flourishes misunderstood by modern minds. Others suspect it encodes directions to a hidden location, perhaps a buried treasure, an artifact, or a secret library. Fringe theorists link it to everything from Rosicrucians to alchemical formulas, to hidden maps, to the Ark of the Covenant. Still, others say, maybe it's not a message at all. Maybe it's a riddle for the soul. A mental mirror meant to make you stop and ask, what is worth preserving? What is too sacred for plain speech? You find yourself standing very still in front of the stone. The 10 letters hover in your mind like a chant or a lock. O-U-O-S-V-A-V-V, DM. Some say DM stands for Dismanibus, a Latin dedication meaning to the spirits of the dead, common on Roman tombstones, which means the rest could be anything: a memory, a warning, a spell. or a bedtime story meant to remind us that even in a quiet garden in England, mystery lives. You trace your fingers in the air over the letters. Wonder who carved them. Wonder who knew what they meant. Wonder if someone is still watching, waiting for someone like you to see the key. And then you remember, not all puzzles are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be sat with, like grief, like love, like the knowledge that something mattered so much someone couldn't say it plainly. They had to encode it into stone. Let that be tonight's lullaby. That, in the world of reason and fact and citation, there still exists a monument that hums with the presence of something felt not known. You step back from the sculpture now. You let the letters swirl softly behind your eyes, dissolving like mist. Maybe tomorrow someone else will crack it, or maybe not. But for now, let it keep its secrets. Let it keep you curious. Let the night deepen around you, and the stars blink with gentle riddles of their own. Sleep well, Codebreaker. The answers can wait. Now we leave the gardens of England behind and step onto an island unlike any other. Far out in the Pacific, surrounded by vast emptiness and salt wind, lies Rapa Nui, known to most of us as Easter Island. A place famous for its giant stone heads, the Moai, those solemn guardians with deep eyes and distant stares. But tonight we aren't here for the statues. We're here for the RongoRongo Script, a mysterious system of writing found carved into a handful of ancient wooden tablets, and like so many artifacts we've encountered, no one can read it. The story begins in the 19th century. When European missionaries arrived on the island in the 1860s, they encountered not just the Moai, but curious wooden planks stored in sacred places. These planks were covered in flowing, elegant glyphs, human figures, animals, abstract shapes, and plant forms, all arranged in carefully ordered rows. The locals called it RongoRongo and said it was a sacred form of knowledge. But already the ability to read it was vanishing. Within just a few decades, not a single person remained who could understand the script. Disease, colonization, and the destruction of native traditions had taken their toll. The oral culture that had supported RongoRongo was broken, and with it, the key to the island's only known writing system. To this day, RongoRongo remains undeciphered. That's not to say we haven't tried. Scholars have studied the glyphs, noting that they are often arranged in reverse boustrophodon, a writing pattern where one line is read left to right and the next right to left, but with the characters flipped. Think of a farmer plowing a field in rows, turning back and forth. It's intricate, intentional, and absolutely baffling. Historians still argue. Some believe RongoRongo may represent a proto-writing system used more symbolically than phonetically, something closer to mnemonic triggers for oral recitations. Others insist it must be a true script with grammar, syntax, and vocabulary. There are fewer than 30 surviving tablets scattered across museums and private collections. Some are burned, broken, or incomplete. All of them raise more questions than they answer. What do the glyphs represent? Are they phonetic, like an alphabet? Logographic, like Chinese characters? Or something else entirely? Icons in a sacred sequence? Part of a memory device? Some researchers have tried to link RongoRongo to Old World scripts, like the Indus Valley symbols, or even the writing of the Maya. But no direct connection has ever been proven. Still others wonder, was this a homegrown invention? If so, it would make RongoRongo one of only a few independently invented writing systems in human history, alongside Sumerian cuneiform Egyptian hieroglyphs, Chinese script, and Mesoamerican glyphs. That's no small thing. And here's where the mystery deepens. Easter Island is famously isolated. Thousands of kilometers from the nearest continent, it's one of the most remote inhabited islands on Earth. Yet here was a culture that may have developed its own writing entirely on its own, a miracle of isolation. But then, where did it go? Why was such a remarkable tradition allowed to vanish in just a few generations? Some blame the missionaries who saw the glyphs as pagan and encouraged the destruction of the tablets. Others blame the Peruvian slave raids of the 1860s, which decimated the population and took many of the learned men away. And some simply point to time and the fragility of oral cultures under the weight of colonization. You imagine now one of those scribes perhaps sitting by firelight, a curved knife in hand etching each glyph into the wood of a banana tree. Each line carefully arranged, each symbol holding part of a story, a genealogy, a myth. He doesn't know it's the last time someone will do this. He doesn't know that in a few short decades no one will remember how to read it. But he carves anyway. He believes the knowledge will live on, and in a way it has, because you're here holding that image in your mind. A scribe, a plank, a language that speaks without words. And maybe that's what RongoRongo is now, not a code to crack, but a presence to honor. A lost voice whispering across the sea. You imagine the glyphs dancing in your dreams tonight. Figures in profile, turtles, spirals, men bending, birds flying, a monkey-like symbol beside a fish. They repeat, overlap, and vanish. They don't tell you what they mean, but you feel what they mean. Because language, after all, is just a bridge between two minds. And sometimes you don't need to cross it completely. You just need to see the shape of it. RongoRongo remains unread, but it is not forgotten, and perhaps it never truly was. Perhaps even now, somewhere in the subconscious mind of Rapa Nui, the meanings still linger. In chants, in dances, in the curve of a wave, or the way light filters through palm leaves. Tonight, let your breath slow like the tide against volcanic shorelines. Let your thoughts drift with the carved planks adrift on history's ocean. Let the mystery of writing its purpose, its absence, its rhythm cradle you softly into sleep. And know this, even lost languages dream. The ground beneath your feet feels different now, firmer, heavier. You're standing not above a grave or in a temple, but underneath history itself. The weight of time above you is crushing, silent, unmoved for millennia. This is no metaphor. You are standing near one of the most extraordinary tombs ever built. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, and the man whose ambition united a fractured land into an empire that still bears his name. You've likely heard of the terracotta army, those thousands of life-sized warriors carved from clay, armed and armored, standing in rows beneath the ground near Xi'an. But those famous soldiers are just the doormen, just the guards. They aren't the tomb, they're the warning. Because the true tomb, the central burial chamber, the one no one has seen in over 2,200 years, remains sealed. Untouched, and possibly untouchable. When the tomb was discovered in the 1970s, archaeologists were stunned, not just by the army of clay warriors, chariots, acrobats, and horses, but by the sheer scale of what lies hidden underground. Historical texts, particularly the records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian, written a century after Qin Shi Huang's death, describe a sprawling underground palace, a replica of his empire, complete with rivers of flowing mercury ceilings, encrusted with constellations and traps designed to kill intruders. Historians still argue, was Sima Qian exaggerating? Was it myth propaganda? And yet, modern testing around the tomb has revealed abnormally high levels of mercury in the soil, far higher than normal environmental levels. So, what if it's true? What if deep below, encased in stone and clay, is an entire subterranean world untouched by time, a sealed microcosm of imperial China, a city of the dead that has never been looted, never been explored, never been seen? But here's the kicker, we still haven't opened it. Why? Because to open the tomb, to break the seals, to pierce the earth, we'd risk destroying the very thing we seek. The Chinese government, alongside international archaeologists, has decided to wait until technology improves, until they can excavate without damaging what lies inside, until they can see without breaking. So it waits. Qin Shi Huang was buried in 210 BCE, having declared himself the first emperor of a united China just over a decade earlier. Obsessed with immortality, he sent emissaries in search of elixirs, consulted alchemists, and built a tomb that would let him rule in the afterlife with the same dominion he held in life. He succeeded. In a way, he still rules. His tomb remains one of the greatest archaeological mysteries on Earth, not because it's lost, but because it's right there, and invisible. You stand on the mound now, as others have for centuries, without ever knowing what's beneath. You close your eyes and imagine the chamber below. A man lies in a jade coffin surrounded by bronze treasures, lacquered floors, and gold dragons. Rivers of mercury curl around stone mountains. Stars glint from a painted ceiling. Above him, silence. He is both king and prisoner. The walls are rumored to be rigged with crossbow traps. The tomb was said to be filled with booby traps and curses, ancient defenses against future violators. Some say the very air inside would be poisonous. It's not fear that stops the world from opening it. It's reverence, and perhaps a little guilt, because some things are not meant to be known too soon. Some truths must sleep until we're ready to handle them. Qin Shi Huang's tomb is one such truth. You let that thought linger, that even in the 21st century with satellites, LiDAR nanotechnology, and particle scanners, there are still places we won't go. Not yet, because somewhere between caution and awe lies another reason. We're afraid of what we'll find. Maybe not monsters, not curses, but clarity. Evidence of an ancient world that mastered metallurgy, astronomy, architecture, and power at a scale we don't like to admit. What if the tomb isn't just a marvel of ancient engineering? What if it holds knowledge? What if below your feet lie scrolls, devices, or writings that reshape what we think we know about early civilization? It would be thrilling. It would be terrifying. It would be irreversible. So tonight we leave the tomb undisturbed. We walk away back into the darkness of respectful uncertainty. We don't need to crack it open to feel its gravity. We don't need to translate it to understand what it says. It says, I ruled, I dreamed, I remain. And that's enough. As you drift into sleep, picture that great chamber unseen by eyes for 2 millennia. Let the imagined starlight glimmer above you. Let the slow shimmer of mercury rivers lull you deeper into rest. Let mystery be your pillow. Let silence be your blanket. The emperor sleeps still, and tonight so do you. You hear it before you see it. A long, low wail, more like a moan pulled from somewhere deep in the lungs and tangled in fear. You follow the sound into a cold stone corridor. The walls sweat with time. The air tightens around your chest. And then you see him, his face twisted into a scream so raw it seems frozen mid-breath. Eyes wide, mouth gaping. A moment of agony captured not in art, but in flesh and bone. This is Unknown Man, better known as the Screaming Mummy. Found in the Deir el-Bahari cache near Luxor, Egypt in 1881, he's unlike any mummy you've seen, because he was never meant to be one. Let's back up. Most Egyptian mummies are carefully prepared. The body is cleaned, organs removed, natron applied to dry the flesh, and the skin wrapped meticulously in linen. It's a spiritual ritual, a ticket to the afterlife, designed to preserve not just the body, but the soul's journey beyond. But not this one. Unknown Man. Was found with no wrappings, his body hastily embalmed, or rather partially not embalmed at all. His organs were still intact. His skin had blackened, almost scorched. His neck stretched. His jaw held open not naturally, but violently. The cause, unknown. Some believe he was buried alive. Others suspect poisoning or strangulation, or an execution so shameful it defied traditional burial rites. But here's the strangest part: he wasn't tossed into a pit or left exposed. He was buried among royalty, alongside pharaohs and high priests, a mix of reverence and revulsion, care and contempt. Whoever he was, he mattered enough to be hidden here, yet punished enough to be denied peace. Historians still argue. Some suggest this was Pentower, the disgraced son of Pharaoh Ramses III. According to ancient texts, Pentower was part of the infamous harem conspiracy, a plot to murder the pharaoh. When the scheme was discovered, Pentower is said to have been forced to commit suicide. And in Egyptian tradition, suicide, especially under punishment, was a spiritual abomination. It denied the deceased access to the afterlife unless carefully corrected through ritual. If this is Pentower, his burial was a compromise, a way to dispose of royal shame without advertising it. DNA testing in recent years has supported this theory, linking unknown man E to Ramses III. Their genetic markers suggest a father-son relationship. So perhaps this is Pentower, the screaming prince, condemned by his own blood, trapped between worlds, entombed like a king, but prepared like a criminal. But let's not rush to label him. Let's imagine instead the deeper picture. A man perhaps still young, perhaps ambitious, perhaps manipulated, perhaps in love, perhaps caught in a royal drama far beyond his control, and in the end, betrayed, broken, silenced. But even in death he speaks. His scream survives, a millennia-long echo of injustice or remorse or defiance. And it's this echo that keeps us up at night, because the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with silence in death. Mummies were meant to be still, closed, sealed. The open mouth in their ritual was a sacred gesture, the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed to restore speech in the afterlife. But in this case, the mouth is open not by magic, but by horror. We don't know if he screamed when he died. We don't know if his mouth was pried open post-mortem. We don't know what he saw in those final moments. But we know he wasn't forgotten, because here you are listening. Maybe his punishment failed. Maybe his scream became his salvation. Maybe, just maybe, someone is finally asking, who was he really? And isn't that a kind of justice? You imagine his story retold in whispers through tomb corridors, in the soft brushing of archaeologists' hands, in the pages of dusty books. He became more than a conspirator, more than a warning. He became a mystery. You close your eyes. You see his face not grotesque but human, young maybe, confused, angry, brave, and the scream it fades, not because it was silenced, but because it was heard. Now let the silence return. Let the stone grow still again. Let the air grow warmer and your breath grow slow. The mummy will remain where he is, his truth locked in a jaw no longer trembling. And you will drift gently into the night, carrying with you not fear, but curiosity, compassion, the soft, unsettling wonder that there are stories buried in sand we haven't finished hearing yet. Sleep now, not because there's nothing left to explore, but because there's always more. You're walking through a dusty museum room, now quiet, a little dim, the light catching glass displays and reflecting back at odd angles. Your footsteps echo softly against polished tile. And then, at the far end of the hall, you see it. A skull. But not just any skull. This one is clear, transparent, like quartz carved with perfect symmetry. Its eyes are hollow. Its surface glistens under the spotlights. And for just a moment, it doesn't seem dead. It seems like it's watching. This is one of the infamous crystal skulls. There are 13 of them depending on who you ask, or one, or none. The number changes depending on the story, but the mystery stays the same. Because these aren't just relics, they're riddles in stone. The most famous skull is the Mitchell-Hedges skull, allegedly discovered in 1924 by Anna Mitchell-Hedges, the adopted daughter of British adventurer Frederick Mitchell-Hedges, while exploring the ruins of a Mayan city in Belize. She claimed she found it under a collapsed altar gleaming like ice in the jungle heat. It's carved from a single block of clear quartz with a detachable jaw and intricate detailing. No tool marks, no seams. A level of craftsmanship that modern engineers admit would be difficult to replicate even today, especially without modern tools. And here's where it gets weird. Quartz, especially clear quartz, is extremely hard, about 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Carving something like this with pre-Columbian technology should have been impossible. Yet, here it is. Even stranger. No known Mesoamerican civilization has ever been shown to produce carved quartz skulls. So where did it come from? Historians still argue. Some suggest it's a 19th century hoax created in Europe and sold to collectors hungry for exotic wonders. Others believe it's a lost artifact proof of an advanced culture whose traces have mostly vanished. And then, there are the others. The ones who claim the skulls are not of this world. They say the skulls are part of a network, 13 crystal heads, each placed on Earth by extraterrestrials, each containing vital knowledge about human history, healing, or the structure of the universe. Some say, when all 13 are reunited, something will happen, an awakening, a transformation, a revelation. Is it true? No one can say. The Smithsonian has one. The British Museum has one. The Musée du Quai Branly in Paris has one. Scientific testing on several skulls has shown clear evidence of modern rotary tools, suggesting they're forgeries from the 19th century, not ancient treasures. And yet, there are those who believe the Mitchell Hedges skull is different, that its origin remains unclear, that its carving is too perfect, that it holds energy. You lean closer. Some who have held the skull claim to feel a vibration, a pulsing sensation, a warmth. Others report dreams, visions, a sense of being watched or guided. Whether psychological, spiritual, or something stranger, people feel things around these skulls. They're not just objects, they're presence. You wonder what makes a mystery powerful. Is it the facts or the feelings? Because the skulls, real or forged, old or new, have become symbols of what we want to believe, of what we fear, of the fragility of truth in a world overflowing with stories. Some say the skulls were meant to preserve memory, that they store knowledge like computers carved in crystal, that their shape reflects not death, but the vessel of consciousness, a human head perfectly hollow, waiting. You imagine now holding one in your hands, cool to the touch, heavier than expected, the light bending strangely through the quartz. For a moment, your own face reflects back in it, distorted, ghostly, as if some part of you has slipped inside. You blink. It's still just a rock, but it feels like more. You remember that quartz is piezoelectric, meaning it can hold and transmit electric charge, used in watches, radios, computers. So, could it store something else? Could quartz record intention, emotion, memory? Science would say no. But history has always left room for belief. So tonight, don't ask whether the skulls are real or fake, ancient or modern, alien or human. Ask instead, why do we need them? Why do we return to them again and again in books, in films, in whispered stories told around campfires? Because they represent something we're missing, a forgotten technology, a sacred geometry, or maybe just the aching need to believe that someone somewhere knew more than we do and left us a gift, or a warning. As you lay back now, you feel the weight of quartz in your palms, heavy, cold, knowing. And then slowly the crystal turns to mist. The skull fades from view. You are left with only the shape of a question outlined in glass. And that is enough. Sleep now. Not because you've solved the mystery, but because you're holding it gently without needing an answer. The skull watches. The dream begins. The room changes again, from cold museum glass to something warmer, older. You're surrounded now by silk screens and carved wooden panels. The air smells faintly of preserved herbs and lacquered boxes. A soft glow pulses from lanterns behind you. You've stepped into a tomb, but not one of stone and dust. This one is preserved in flesh. Tonight, you meet the Lady of Dai, also known as Xinzhui, the best preserved mummy in the world. She's over 2,000 years old, and yet, her body tells a very different story. Discovered in the early 1970s near Changsha, China, in a Han Dynasty tomb, Lady Dai was found inside a sealed underground chamber. Archaeologists had expected the usual bones, a few silk artifacts, perhaps a lacquer coffin. What they found instead stopped them cold. There she was, a woman in her 50s, lying in layers of silk inside a series of nested coffins surrounded by hundreds of grave goods, makeup boxes, lacquer bowls, exotic foods, perfumes, even her last meal still in her stomach. But what truly shocked them, her body was soft. Her skin was still elastic. Her joints could bend. Her veins, organs, even her blood vessels were intact. She was not dry like a mummy. She was moist, almost lifelike. So lifelike, in fact, that pathologists were able to perform a full autopsy, including a diagnosis. She died of a heart attack, likely triggered by obesity, hypertension, and a heavy last meal. Imagine that. A woman who lived during the time of Julius Caesar, who rode in silk carriages and listened to zither music under painted ceilings, still whispering her secrets to modern doctors. Not through scrolls or inscriptions, but through her flesh. Historians still argue, how did her body remain so well preserved? The tomb was constructed with astonishing care. 4 airtight coffins, layers of charcoal and white clay surrounding them. An unidentified liquid inside the innermost coffin, brown, faintly acidic, never conclusively explained. Some suggest it acted as a preservative. Others say the environment was simply perfect, no bacteria, no oxygen, no temperature fluctuation. But there's something almost eerie about it. Preservation so complete it feels unnatural. As if the Lady of Dai wasn't just mummified, but paused, caught in a still moment, halfway between death and memory. You imagine now her life. She was a noblewoman married to a high-ranking official. She lived in luxury with servants' gardens, fine clothing. Yet her medical profile was strikingly modern. Clogged arteries, gallstones, lower back pain. She wasn't a myth. She was you in a different time. Real, vulnerable, human. And now, more than 2,000 years later, she's teaching us. Teaching us about medicine, about burial practices, about how the ancients honored the dead, not with silence, but with intimate care, protecting not just the soul's journey, but the body's form. You picture the hands that wrapped her, the craftsmen who carved her lacquer boxes, the scribes who recorded her name, the final look her husband gave before the tomb was sealed forever. They couldn't have known we'd find her. They couldn't have imagined a future world with scalpels, microscopes, lab coats, but they preserved her anyway. Because memory mattered. Because they believed to keep the body was to keep the person. So what does it mean now that she lies in a museum drawer, not as a curiosity, but as a miracle, a message across time? We know more about her than almost any woman of her era. Her face, her organs, her fingerprints, but not her voice. That's the one thing we've lost. So maybe that's your job tonight, to listen with more than your ears, to hear the silence she left behind, to imagine her in the garden, in conversation, in song, and maybe in the quiet you hear her laughter, soft, refined, interrupted by a cough from too much rich food. She turns her head. The silk of her robe rustles. She does not know her body will last longer than her country, but she smiles anyway, because she is alive. You hold on to that thought, that a person from another world, a person with soft fingers and a tired heart and a full stomach, can still reach through history and touch your dreams. That's the real preservation. That's the true afterlife. And now the lantern light dims. The tomb fades, and Lady Di, who has waited patiently for 2,000 years, gently returns to rest. She is not gone. She is simply quiet. And so are you. The desert feels different at night. The heat retreats, leaving behind only silence and the rustling of wind across bone-dry dunes. The stars above are bright sharp. There are no city lights here, no aircraft, no phones buzzing in your pocket. Just stillness, and a feeling like something ancient is watching. You walk across the hard-packed sand until you see a tent dimly lit from within. A group of researchers in dust-covered gear sit hunched over long wooden tables, and laid gently on linen before them. A body, thin, elongated, delicate. But it is the head that draws your attention. It is not human, or at least not entirely. Tonight, you've come to meet the Nazca Mummies, a set of recently uncovered remains in southern Peru that have stirred controversy, disbelief, and more than a little excitement, because they don't look like ordinary mummies. Discovered in recent years near the Nazca region, famous for its massive geoglyphs etched into the desert, these figures are said to be humanoid, but with several striking differences. They have 3 elongated fingers on each hand. Their heads are oversized with narrow skulls and large almond-shaped eye sockets. Some specimens are very small, barely the size of a child's torso. Others appear to be more adult-like, yet still retain the same non-human features. And most mysteriously, they are covered in a white powdery substance supposedly used in the preservation process. Are they real? Are they fake? Historians still argue. Some archaeologists dismiss them outright, calling them modern fabrications created by manipulating real human or animal remains into alien shapes. X-rays critics say reveal suspicious anatomical inconsistencies. The hands look stitched together, the skulls tampered with, but others disagree. Some independent labs claim the DNA results reveal something astonishing. While most of the genetic material appears human, a significant portion of it is unclassified, not animal, not plant, not known. The debate has gone global. Conferences have been held. Debunking videos have been made. Government officials have issued statements. And still the mystery refuses to lie still. Because the real question isn't what these mummies are, it's why they were found in Nazca. The region has long been a magnet for the strange. The Nazca Lines giant geoglyphs of spiders, monkeys, and astronauts. Yes, astronauts stretch across hundreds of square miles. They're only visible from the sky. No one knows why they were made or how such massive designs could have been drawn by a people with no aircraft, no aerial view, no easy tools to measure over that kind of scale. Were they for the gods, for the stars, or for visitors? You look again at the body before you. It is curled in the fetal position. Its skin is smooth, almost waxy. Its neck unnaturally long. There's no obvious stitching, no seams, no sense that someone made this, only that someone was this. You lean closer. Is that fear you feel, or fascination? Because there's something vulnerable about the figure, something quiet. It does not feel malevolent or monstrous. It feels alone. Maybe it's not meant to scare. Maybe it's a message. Maybe we've misread the whole thing. In many ancient Andean cultures, elongated skulls were normal, produced intentionally through cranial binding during infancy. It was a sign of beauty power or spiritual status. The process didn't damage the brain, but it did change the shape permanently. Could that be part of this? Could the so-called aliens be exaggerated forms of old cultural practices? Or if they're fake, why are they so convincing? And why risk creating them in a region already thick with speculation? As you step away from the mummy, the sand crunches softly beneath your boots. Outside the tent, the wind picks up. You gaze into the night sky where the Milky Way cuts through darkness like a river of stars. The same sky the Nazca people looked upon 2,000 years ago. The same stars that inspired them to carve giant hummingbirds and lizards into the earth. The same stars these beings, if real, may have once called home. Tonight we don't declare truth. We don't demand proof. We sit with the possibility that something different once walked among us. That it was buried, preserved, and found only when we were ready to wonder again. That maybe alien isn't about space. Maybe it's just another word for forgotten. Let that thought carry you now. Let the desert cradle you in its ancient arms. Let the silence settle like dust. There is no rush to understand. The Nazca mummies will wait. And perhaps they're listening too. You've been walking for hours. At first, the desert felt eternal heat waves shimmering over cracked ground. Silence stretching so wide, it felt like it might swallow you. But now something's changed. The sand under your boots is finer, pale gold. The wind whispers more softly, and rising before you is a plateau of stone that seems out of place. This is the Tarim Basin, an arid corner of western China once touched by the Silk Road and swept by ancient winds. And here, buried beneath the sands for thousands of years, were found the Tarim mummies. They don't belong, not in the way you expect. Their skin is pale, their noses high-bridged, their hair is light brown, even reddish in some cases. They wear woolen trousers, felt hats, woven tartans, clothing that looks more Celtic than Chinese. And they're old, incredibly old. Some date back to 1800 BCE, placing them among the oldest known mummified humans in East Asia. And they were found not in golden tombs or stone sarcophagi, but in wooden coffins buried in sand that desiccated and preserved them with eerie perfection. The most famous among them is the beauty of Lulan. She's delicate, graceful, her eyelashes still visible. Her skin cracked like old paper, but unmistakably human. She looks asleep, just barely, dressed in wool wrapped in cloth. Her people were clearly skilled weavers, her outfit detailed with geometric patterns. And her DNA, not what you'd expect. Genetic testing revealed that many of the Tarim mummies carry Western Eurasian ancestry, a surprising twist that challenges long-held ideas about the isolation of early China. Historians still argue, were these people immigrants from the West, or descendants of a now-vanished culture that developed independently in this crossroads of continents? What's clear is that the Tarim Basin was never empty. For millennia, it was home to farmers, traders, horse breeders, and wanderers. The desert may seem remote now, but it was once a highway of ideas, languages, and genes. And yet, the mummies themselves raise more questions than they answer. Why were they buried with such care, yet left exposed to the dry desert air? Why were their grave markers shaped like oars, as if pointing to a river that no longer exists? Why do their faces seem so peaceful? You kneel beside one now, not Beauty of Lulan, but a child, a girl, maybe 10 years old. Her dress is still intact, her tiny feet bound in leather shoes, her lips parted slightly. You wonder what she dreamed before she drifted into sleep that never ended. Were these people travelers, refugees, explorers, or a civilization entirely lost to us? No cities, no written records, just bodies wrapped in time, waiting for someone to remember them. Some scholars believe the Tarim people spoke Tocharian, an ancient Indo-European language long extinct. Others suggest they may have been early branches of Yamnaya peoples connected to the Indo-Iranian migrations. But again, these are only theories. The desert has not yet given up its final answer. Still, what remains is powerful. You don't need an encyclopedia to feel the impact of standing beside a mummy who lived, breathed, and walked nearly 4,000 years ago. One who wore clothes you could still wear today. One whose face could pass you on the street and not seem strange. There's something grounding in that, something deeply human, because these mummies aren't relics of a forgotten god, king, or monument builder. They're people, families, children, traders. They didn't ask to become immortal. They didn't build tombs to be remembered. But the desert chose them, dried them, kept them. And now they speak without voices. They tell us the past is not neat. It does not sit quietly in one place belonging to one people. It is mixed, muddied, shared, like the Silk Road itself. You imagine the basin centuries ago. Camels moving across the sand, fires crackling at roadside inns, traders unloading jars of saffron silk turquoise, languages overlapping like the weave of a basket, cultures melting into one another like colors in dawn light. And then the wind came, and the dunes moved, and the memories fell silent. Until now, until someone looked down at the sand and said, "Wait, what is that?" and uncovered a smile. You lean back now. The desert is still. The stars glimmer above the basin, and the shapes of old mountain ridges rise faintly in the dark. The mummies rest undisturbed again, wrapped in their woolen shawls, still telling stories with their silence. And you feel a little older, a little wiser, a little smaller, because the world is wide, and full of forgotten people who once breathed the same air you do now. Sleep comes slowly tonight, but warmly, because the desert isn't empty. It's full of memory. You wake slowly to the sound of wind brushing across stone. It's not the whisper of desert sand this time, but a heavier kind of silence, thick, patient, like something's waiting. You're standing on a plateau again, but this time high above sea level, where the earth is flat and dry, and winds pull across the land with surgical precision. Then you see them. Lines. Enormous sweeping lines etched into the ground so vast and precise they make no sense from the ground. Welcome to the Nazca Lines. Scattered across 200 square miles of the Peruvian desert, these ancient geoglyphs form vast images. Spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, lizards, even what some describe as an astronaut figure with a large head and raised hand. They weren't drawn on paper or carved into walls. They were scraped directly into the desert floor by removing the top layer of iron-rich rocks to reveal the lighter-colored soil underneath. They were made to be seen from above. But here's the mystery. The Nazca people lived between 200 BCE and 600 CE, a time with no known flying machines, no aerial platforms, no drones. So, how? Historians still argue. Some believe they were ritual walkways, paths meant to be walked as part of religious ceremonies, offerings to gods for water or harvest. Others suggest they were astronomical calendars aligning with solstices or constellations used to mark seasonal shifts. But that's just the start. Because the lines are too large, some stretch over 200 feet, and the images are made with such geometric precision that they can only be fully understood from hundreds of feet in the air. So again the question, who were they for? Some say the gods. Others whisper something else. You've probably heard the theories that the Nazca were in contact with extraterrestrials and the lines were made as landing strips or communication signals. It sounds wild, except that the lines are undeniably unusual. They show no signs of being lived on or farmed around. They don't follow rivers or trade routes, and they've lasted for over 500 years, preserved by the desert's dry, windless climate. Some of the animals depicted, like the monkey, aren't native to the region, which raises another question: where did the artists see them? And the designs, they weren't scrawled randomly. They were engineered with long, straight lines connecting geometric shapes, intersecting circles and pathways that span entire valleys. Imagine this. You're part of a small group of people living in a harsh desert. You have no metal tools, no wheels, no written language. And yet somehow you organize the creation of kilometer-long symbols visible only from the sky. Why? What drives that effort? You walk slowly now across the surface of one line. It feels like walking across a shadow no deeper than a shallow groove, no wider than a footpath. And yet it stretches endlessly in both directions, unwavering. There's no clear start, no clear end, only the direction, the intention. Maybe that's the key. The lines were never meant to be seen, not in the modern sense. They were meant to be walked, felt, underfoot, believed. A form of devotion, maybe. Or a dialogue with powers greater than themselves, even if those powers were simply the sky. Some scholars now believe the lines were part of a ritual landscape, a kind of massive spiritual circuit meant to be completed on foot. A prayer spread out over miles, a meditation made physical, and in that light, they make sense. Because sometimes the message isn't meant to be read, it's meant to be embodied. You imagine now a line of people walking slowly along the hummingbird's wing, their heads bowed, their feet stirring up dust, their faces lit by torchlight or moonlight, chanting, remembering, offering, not performance but purpose. And then you imagine them leaving, the design behind them untouched, unspoiled, waiting. And somehow that waiting never ended. Even now, satellites fly overhead, snapping photos of these mysterious geoglyphs. Tourists take plane rides to marvel at them. Scientists use AI to uncover new patterns, but the lines remain the same, still, silent, enduring. Because they were never just art, they were an act of faith, and maybe that's why they still pull at us. Because we too are looking for something larger, something to point to and say that meant something, even if I can't say why. So tonight, as your breath slows and your body softens into the blankets, let the Nazca Lines stretch across your mind. Feel their long, silent paths, their impossible shapes, their unanswered questions, and sleep knowing that sometimes the most beautiful messages are the ones we aren't supposed to fully understand. Because they weren't made for eyes, they were made for souls. The air grows heavier as you descend into a dry basin. It feels like you've stepped into a forgotten planet, silent hills of cracked earth all around you, the wind tugging gently at your sleeves as if urging you forward. There are no trees here, no rivers, no signs of life, just rocks, sun, and something moving. No, not moving, just out of place, a boulder, all alone on a flat stretch of dried mud. Behind it, a long curved trail, as if the stone had gotten up one night and dragged itself across the desert floor. This isn't a dream. You've arrived at the racetrack playa in Death Valley, California, home of the sailing stones. For decades, these rocks, some small as baseballs, others as large as a microwave, have left behind long, winding tracks in the earth. No footprints, no wheel marks, just stone trails in the mud. And no one could explain why. No one had ever seen them move. Until recently. Historians and geologists puzzled over it for nearly a century. Theories piled up, some grounded in science, others more creative. Some believed it was magnetic fields. Others proposed powerful gusts of wind. A few claimed the movement was deliberate, a message or a game, or even a trick played by ancient beings who had walked the earth long before us. The playa is an ancient lakebed, a flat, dry surface that cracks into polygons in the summer sun. In winter, though, things change. Rare rains pool on the surface. At night, thin sheets of ice form beneath the rocks. Then, with the slightest breeze, the rocks begin to glide ever so slowly across the slick, wet clay beneath them. They move at a crawl, just a few inches per second, but over the course of hours or days, they carve winding paths that last for years. This was confirmed only in 2014 when researchers finally captured the motion using time-lapse photography and GPS trackers. So yes, there is a rational explanation, but that doesn't make it feel any less eerie. Because even knowing the science standing here alone with the rocks, there's a sense that the place is alive, that these stones carry stories, that their movement, however subtle, isn't just a physical process, it's a quiet resistance to the idea that everything in nature is predictable. Some of the tracks curve double back, even intersect, as if the stones are aware of one another, as if they're dancing. Historians still debate whether ancient people noticed them or marked them with significance. Indigenous tribes in the region had rich traditions of animism belief in the spiritual essence of natural features, but no definitive references to the sailing stones have survived. And that's fitting somehow, because the mystery has remained for the most part pure, not clouded by legend or myth, but by wonder, a scientific curiosity that still feels magical. You reach down and touch one of the stones. It's surprisingly smooth, warm from the sun, completely unremarkable on its own. But the trail it left, that's the real treasure. You follow it with your eyes. 50 feet, maybe 60. It veers slightly left, then sharply right. You picture it gliding slowly in the moonlight, a silent traveler on a lake of frozen glass. And you start to feel something strange, not fear, not excitement, just humility. Because here's a mystery that doesn't scream. It doesn't glow or roar or warn. It just exists, quietly, confidently, without asking for attention. And yet people come. They walk miles into the desert. They stand in the heat. They take photos of rocks because these rocks moved. And that's enough. You wonder what else moves when no one's watching. How many other parts of the world shift just slightly inch by inch without ever asking to be noticed. Maybe we're all moving like that, just slowly enough not to notice it until we look back and see the trail. Tonight, as you lie back, you feel yourself begin to slide softly, gently, like a stone on the playa. You're not stuck, you're gliding. The ground beneath you changes. You don't need to rush, don't need to steer. The path will shape itself. You've left a mark already, even if no one sees it yet. Sleep now. Let the ice form beneath your thoughts. Let the wind of the universe push you just enough. The desert watches, and the rocks, they remember. You step across a mossy threshold now into a world far older than cities, older than kings, older perhaps than the stories we even know how to tell. The hills are green and quiet, but something in the earth hums beneath your feet. You've arrived in Scotland, and the stone you're looking for isn't just buried, it's painted. Tonight, we're visiting the Cochno Stone, one of the largest and most mysterious sets of prehistoric rock art in all of Europe. It doesn't look like much at first, just a broad, flat boulder partially covered by grass and soil tucked behind a row of trees in West Dunbartonshire just outside Glasgow. But once revealed, it is astonishing. The Cochno Stone measures over 40 feet across and is covered with over 90 intricate carvings, most of them in the form of cup and ring marks, circular depressions surrounded by concentric circles, spirals, and connecting lines. The kind of art that wasn't drawn. It was cut into the hard sandstone, likely using only stone tools more than 5,000 years ago. That's older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, and yet, we don't know what it means. Historians still argue. Some suggest the symbols are maps celestial or terrestrial, pointing to stars or sacred landscapes. Others believe they were part of rituals, maybe linked to fertility ancestor worship or initiation rites. Still others think they are proto-writing, a kind of early language meant to encode sacred knowledge. But there are no records, no Rosetta Stone for prehistoric Scotland, only symbols, only whispers. The Cochno Stone was first recorded in the late 1800s by the Reverend James Harvey. It quickly gained attention from archaeologists and locals alike, but the more people visited it, the more it was damaged. In the 1960s, fearing further vandalism, authorities made a radical decision. They buried the entire stone under several feet of soil. And for nearly 50 years it vanished from sight. Just imagine that a stone so powerful, so perplexing, that the best way to preserve it was to hide it again. Then, in 2015, researchers uncovered it once more temporarily using high-resolution scanning and 3D imaging. They hoped to finally understand the meaning of the marks, but what they found only deepened the mystery. Because some of the symbols look eerily like modern diagrams, planetary orbits, circuits, even stylized representations of galaxies. There are grid-like patterns, dots connected by paths and shapes that seem too symmetrical to be random. Of course, that's part of the trick our brains play. We're meaning makers, pattern seekers. We find shapes in clouds, faces in toast, and intention in the unknown. But here's the strange part. You're not the only one to see it. Generations of people across the British Isles and beyond have carved similar marks into stones for millennia. Cup and ring marks appear from Ireland to Italy, from Portugal to Poland, and no one knows why. There is no written explanation, only repetition, which means the symbols weren't just decorative. They were important. You walk slowly now around the edge of the stone. Your fingertips trace the grooved circles. Some are so shallow they're barely visible. Others are deep, confident, worn smooth by weather and time. You try to imagine the hands that made them, who they were, what they believed. Did they kneel as they carved? Did they sing? Did they cry? What were they saying to the stone, or to whatever they believed was listening inside it? Maybe that's why we still return to places like this, because they offer no answers, only invitations. The Cochno Stone doesn't explain itself. It doesn't shout. It waits, patiently, as if it knows the meanings we seek can't be written down, only felt. So let's feel it. Feel the cold stone under your palm, the moss tickling your knees. The stillness of a summer night in ancient Scotland when a community gathered under torchlight to mark the ground not with borders or roads, but with mystery. You can almost hear them now, a whisper of drumming, a child laughing, a sharp tap of stone on stone, and above them stars wheeling in quiet arcs, the same stars above you now. Because time doesn't pass here, not in the way we're used to. It circles, like the rings, and the cups, and the echoes in the stone. So sleep tonight beneath the mossy hills. Let the symbols wrap around your dreams. Let the questions stretch into spirals. You do not need to know what they mean. It's enough to remember that someone long ago thought they mattered, and carved them deep into the earth so they wouldn't be forgotten. You awaken with your thoughts already floating somewhere between sky and story. And fittingly, the next place you travel isn't on land at all. It rises through the air, cutting through clouds of incense and legend. You're now hovering over ancient India, and the skies above are filled not just with birds or stars, but with machines. Yes, machines, because tonight you explore the Vimanas, ancient flying crafts described in Hindu epics, soaring cities of brass and gold, said to traverse the skies with grace, fire, and thunder. Long before the Wright brothers, long before Da Vinci's sketches, these mythical vehicles had already taken flight in the minds of the ancients. You walk slowly into a great temple courtyard. The scent of sandalwood floats in the air, bells echo softly, and from a stone relief along the temple wall, a figure stares back at you, seated inside what appears to be a cockpit surrounded by levers and tubes. Welcome to the blurred space between scripture and science. The word Vimana originally meant palace or chariot of the gods, but in later Sanskrit texts, especially the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, it takes on a very different tone, descriptions of flying machines capable of vertical lift, multi-directional flight, and even space travel. Some were said to be shaped like birds, others resembled circular discs. One passage even describes a vehicle rising into the sky powered by Mercury engines and emitting a blazing column of fire. Sounds familiar? To some ears, yes, too familiar. And that's why these stories continue to fascinate. Historians still argue, are these just poetic metaphors, imaginative flourishes meant to elevate the stature of heroes and gods? Or are they embellished memories of something real? Even mainstream archaeologists admit that India's ancient texts are uniquely technical. The Samarangana Sutradhara, a 10th century Sanskrit manuscript on architecture and mechanics, includes entire chapters on flying machines, complete with schematics, materials, propulsion methods, and safety protocols. One design even warns against using human flight during storms due to atmospheric turbulence. Now, were these actual blueprints? Probably not. But their existence suggests that ancient engineers were imagining, and perhaps even experimenting with flight. Let that settle for a moment. Before Newton, before Galileo, before modern metallurgy, someone was writing in precise Sanskrit about lifting into the air. And here's where it gets more interesting. In 1974, a team of scientists and Sanskrit scholars at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore translated a Vedic manuscript known as the Vaimanika Shastra. This document, attributed to the sage Bharadvaja, described multiple types of Vimanas, including their dimensions, engines, and how to avoid enemy detection. Some claimed it read like a modern aeronautics manual. Others, more skeptical, said it was a 20th century forgery. Either way, the debate launched a new field of interest: ancient aeronautics. And for good reason. India's ancient texts are not lone voices. Across the world, cultures as varied as the Mayans, the Sumerians, the Greeks, and the Chinese have stories of flying chariots, sky beings, and wars waged among the stars. The Greeks had Icarus. The Maya had Pakal's tomb lid, which some interpret as showing a man in a rocket ship. And in India, they had Ravana's Pushpaka Vimana, a vehicle of immense beauty that could travel by thought alone. Coincidence or convergence? You climb now into the imagined interior of a Vimana. The walls shimmer with gold leaf and gemstone inlays. Tubes snake overhead. A control panel, perhaps merely symbolic, sits before a cushioned seat. The air hums with energy. Below you, the jungle spreads like an emerald quilt. The clouds part. You rise, and in that moment, the boundary between myth and metaphor begins to blur. What if the ancients weren't simply dreaming? What if they were remembering? Or, more likely, what if they were trying to describe something they only partially understood? Imagine a modern aircraft landing in the Bronze Age. To a shepherd, it would seem divine. To a poet, it would be fire-breathing. To a priest, it would be celestial. And so the story would pass on not as an engineering textbook, but as epic poetry. As scripture. As myth. Not a lie, but not quite fact either. Just translated through wonder. That's what the Vimanas might be, a memory filtered through awe. And whether or not you believe they ever lifted off in the real world, they've certainly taken flight in the human imagination. That's their real power, because while technology ages, imagination doesn't. Tonight, as you close your eyes and float gently down through layers of mist and memory, let the hum of those ancient engines carry you. Let the Sanskrit verses echo softly like a lullaby. You are not alone in dreaming of flight. You never have been. And long before airplanes, jets, or rockets, someone was already whispering stories of machines that soared. Perhaps in the silence of sleep, you'll hear the quiet stirrings of a Vimana's wings. And who knows, maybe you'll fly. The hum of your Vimana fades as you descend. The sky turns amber, and the wind feels heavier. The land beneath you flattens into dry, cracked earth once again, but this time it's different. There's no vegetation, no temples, no stories whispered through carvings or symbols. Only rubble, only silence. And then, radiation. You're standing in Mohenjo-Daro, one of the crown jewels of the Indus Valley Civilization, a city so sophisticated that its layout rivals modern urban planning. Grid-like streets, advanced drainage systems, uniform bricks. But tonight we're not here for the architecture. We're here for the whispers of a disaster so strange, so out of time, that some have wondered, could there have been a nuclear explosion here thousands of years ago? It sounds absurd, almost laughable, but the rumors persist, because something did happen here. When archaeologists first uncovered Mohenjo-Daro in the 1920s, they were stunned by the organization, the planning, the engineering. No palaces, no clear signs of a ruling elite, just a city built with cooperation function and subtle beauty. Then they found the skeletons, some lying in the streets, hands over faces, bodies splayed out as if struck by something sudden. No signs of trauma, no weapons, no mass graves, just people frozen. And in one section of the site, researchers recorded unusually high levels of radiation in the soil, well above what you'd expect from natural background sources. Some of the surrounding stonework also appeared to be fused, as if exposed to extreme heat. You pause now, standing beside one of the ruined walls. The bricks are melted. Not all of them, just a few here and there. It's subtle, easy to overlook, but undeniable. Something hot passed through here. Something not quite normal. Historians still argue. Could it have been a lightning storm, a meteorite, a volcanic vent? Perhaps. All are plausible natural events that could explain heat damage and radiation. But the pattern doesn't fit neatly. The damage seems localized, focused, and the skeletons found lying side by side, some clutching each other in postures of fear. Not buried, not protected, simply overtaken. That's when the wild theory took hold. Some suggested this was the site of an ancient nuclear war, futuristic weapons, lost technologies, a forgotten civilization with the power to create devastation and the poor judgment to use it. They pointed to passages in the Mahabharata which describe a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, blazing with a column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns. A weapon that caused people's hair and nails to fall out, birds to drop dead. food to rot. Sound familiar? It matches point by point the modern effects of radiation sickness. But let's slow down, because while the myth is powerful, there is no direct evidence of nuclear detonation at Mohenjo-Daro. The radiation levels have since been called into question, likely misreported or misunderstood. And the melting of bricks can happen during accidental fires, intense kiln operations, or other high-temperature events. Still, the idea lingers, and it tells us something important. It tells us that we expect more from the past than we're often told. That part of us wants to believe ancient people could do what we've only recently discovered: split atoms, fly chariots, carve lines only the gods can see. But maybe the real story is even more impressive. Because Mohenjo-Daro didn't need a nuclear bomb to be remarkable. It was a city of peace. No weapons caches have been found, no defensive walls, just homes organized, connected, efficient. A civilization that valued hygiene, order, and community. In some ways, they were ahead of us. Their drainage systems would put some modern cities to shame. Their city planning followed modular design, using standardized bricks, something we didn't reintroduce until thousands of years later. And they were traders, communicators, scientists of their time. Perhaps the catastrophe that ended Mohenjo-Daro wasn't war but climate, or shifting rivers, or an epidemic, or internal collapse. Something mundane, something human. But because we don't know for sure, we imagine fire. We imagine thunder from the sky, and we let our fears and fascinations shape the narrative. You kneel now in the ruins, brushing dust from a patterned brick. You imagine the last day, the sudden hush, the stillness. Maybe they heard something, maybe they didn't. Maybe it was quick or slow. Maybe they looked at the sky and thought they had angered a god. But they left no final message, no epic carved into stone, no farewell poem, just bones, just silence. And perhaps that's what haunts us most, because the greatness of Mohenjo-Daro is in its absence of ego. No grand monuments, no pyramids, no temples to power. Just the quiet beauty of people living well, thinking ahead, caring for their streets and neighbors. They vanished without warning. And that reminds us that we might too. So sleep carefully tonight. Let the dust of Mohenjo-Daro settle over your thoughts. Let the soft sound of desert wind wrap around you like a shroud. The city beneath your dreams is gone now, but it still whispers, not of war, but of wisdom, of what we could be if we learned to build more and destroy less. And that's a mystery worth keeping close. The wind is changing again. But this time it carries more than dust, it carries resonance. Not words, not melodies, but sound in its rawest form. You're walking barefoot through a vast stone corridor now. Cool air flows over your skin. The walls are lined with carvings so precise they seem almost digital, as though laser cut. You pause, clap your hands, and the air vibrates in a way it shouldn't. You've entered the realm of acoustic architecture, a world where ancient temples weren't just sacred spaces, but finely tuned instruments. Across continents and civilizations, there are temples that sing, resonate, and amplify, not metaphorically, but physically. And in this section, we listen closely to the structures that were designed to speak back. Let's begin in Malta at the Hal Saflieni Hypogym. This subterranean temple, carved into limestone more than 5,000 years ago, contains a chamber known as the Oracle Room. When you speak inside it, your voice doesn't just echo, it reverberates in a deep, haunting tone that can be heard throughout the entire underground complex. Researchers have tested it. Certain frequencies, especially around 110 Hz, trigger resonance that vibrates through the bones, creating sensations in the body itself. When male voices chant at this pitch, it creates a kind of sound bath enveloping anyone nearby. But why? Historians still argue. Was it intentional, a byproduct of the room's dimensions, or was it designed that way to heighten spiritual experiences, mimic the voice of the gods, or induce altered states of consciousness? We don't know, but we're not done yet. because you're now stepping into the Chichen Itza complex in Mexico, approaching the Temple of Kukulkan. Clap your hands once at the base of the stairs, and something remarkable happens. The sound that comes back isn't your clap, it's a chirp. A sharp piercing sound that matches the call of the Quetzal bird, sacred to the Maya. The structure is angled in such a way that sound waves bounce upward, reflect off the stone terraces, and return altered, reshaped by ancient geometry into an echo of nature. And once again we ask accident or design, because these effects aren't isolated. In India, the Vitala temple in Hampi features stone pillars that ring like bells when struck. In Peru, the Temple of the Condor in Machu Picchu contains a stone chamber shaped like wings and a beak one that channels wind and sound in startling ways. In Egypt, the columns of Karnak echo with a strange fullness that's still being studied today. But one of the most famous acoustic temples, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the king's chamber is built from massive granite blocks and includes a stone sarcophagus that resonates at around 438 Hz. When sound is produced inside the chamber, whether by voice or instrument, it amplifies and sustains, creating a low, thrumming hum that fills the space. Some researchers have spent hours there simply humming, chanting, testing vibrations. Because this isn't just about sound, it's about experience, about spaces that engage the body, not just the ears. And it makes you wonder, did ancient architects know what they were doing? Or were they just building beautifully with the resonance a happy accident? Or perhaps we're the ones missing the point, because many ancient cultures believed sound was divine, that it could heal, that it was the language of creation itself. In Hinduism, the universe begins with a sound, not a shape. In the Bible, the world is spoken into existence. In Egyptian cosmology, the god Ptah creates through speech. Maybe these temples weren't just places to worship, but places to listen. To tune yourself to the vibrations of the universe, to feel truth in your bones, not just in your mind. You walk slowly through a long corridor now. No words, just the soft sound of your footsteps. And then something else, a single note held impossibly long. It might be your breath. It might be the stone remembering something. You close your eyes and hum just once. The walls answer. The floor responds. You are inside a symphony older than science. And suddenly you don't need to understand how it works, because you can feel it. You remember a time before earbuds and streaming playlists when music wasn't entertainment, but invocation. When sound meant survival. When the drumbeat of the heart and the pulse of thunder were one and the same. Tonight the temples hum for you. They hum in Sanskrit, in Quechua, in tongues we've lost, but still feel. The frequencies wrap around your chest, gently coaxing your breath into rhythm. You are vibrating not because you moved, but because something moved through you. You realize now, sound was the secret, the key, the doorway between worlds, and maybe we've only just remembered that. So lie still, let the stones sing you to sleep, not with words, but with resonance, because the most ancient mysteries aren't written in books or carved in stone. They're heard in the quiet spaces between the noise. And tonight, in the echo of ancient walls, you finally hear it, the earth whispering back. You wake, or maybe you never fully slept, but now there's water, endless warm water lapping gently at your sides. Sunlight filters down from above, broken by the ocean's rippling skin. You're no longer in a city or a temple. You're beneath the waves, standing on stone. It shouldn't be here. The water's too deep, the shape too geometric. Yet it stretches out in a nearly straight line, row after row of megalithic blocks, arranged like an ancient highway that was never meant to be seen again. This is the Bimini Road. Discovered in 1968 just off the coast of North Bimini Island in the Bahamas, this curious underwater formation has been the subject of debate ever since. It's about 1/3 of a mile long, composed of large limestone blocks arranged in a linear and slightly curving pattern. Some are rectangular, some trapezoidal. others nearly perfect squares. To the untrained eye, they look man-made, like the remains of a sunken road seawall or even the foundation of an ancient port. And that's exactly what people have claimed. Because the Bimini Road is wrapped in one of the most legendary mysteries of all, the lost continent of Atlantis. You remember Atlantis from earlier tonight, a city of advanced wisdom fallen to the sea. Plato said it disappeared in a single day and night of misfortune. And Bimini, well, that's exactly where the 20th century psychic Edgar Cayce predicted ruins of Atlantis would rise again. In fact, Cayce specifically said that a portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater near Bimini. And then, a few decades later, divers found this. Coincidence? Historians still argue. Geologists have examined the stones, and many believe they're natural formations. The blocks are composed of beach rock, a type of sedimentary rock that forms along coastlines. They fracture over time due to tidal forces, erosion, and chemical weathering, resulting in flat angular shapes that can resemble human construction. Some researchers say the formation is joint-controlled bedding, a naturally occurring pattern. Others argue that even if the stones are natural, their arrangement isn't. That perhaps ancient peoples saw these slabs and used them intentionally, perhaps to build a breakwater or ceremonial platform. And there's more. Just north of Bimini Road, divers have reported other anomalies. Upright stones, blocks stacked atop each other, and even alleged tool marks. But the sea doesn't keep evidence well. Coral grows silt, settles, and soon the past is buried in biology. Still, you drift above it now, watching the stones shift beneath beams of sun. They don't feel accidental, not to you, because something about their rhythm, uneven but purposeful, feels more like ruins than randomness, like the remnants of a place no one expected to return to, like the bones of a forgotten dream. And here's what makes it harder to dismiss. The legend of Atlantis isn't the only story of a sunken world. From the flood myths of Mesopotamia and India to the submerged cities of Dwarka, Yonaguni, and Heraklion, ancient texts and discoveries point to land lost to water. Sometimes slowly through rising seas, sometimes violently through quakes and tsunamis. It's easy to scoff at the idea of Atlantis, but lost cities, those are real. And maybe Bimini Road is a fragment of one. Maybe it's a jetty from a village that stood before the last ice age ended, a harbor where reed boats once docked. Or maybe it's the only clue left from a story not yet written. You swim now alongside the stones, tracing the seams between blocks. One has a clean corner, another rests perfectly aligned like tiles in a puzzle. Fish dart between the gaps. Coral stretches upward like slow, silent fire. And you understand something. This isn't just about stones, it's about hope. Because beneath the water, the earth remembers. It preserves what we bury. And sometimes when the light is right and the tide is low, it lets us peek just briefly at the pages we thought were lost forever. So tonight, let the ocean carry you. Float above forgotten roads. Let your limbs drift as if remembering how to move without weight, without time. The Bimini Road may never tell its full story, but that doesn't mean it's not true. Some stories whisper in stone, some in song, some only in sleep. And here, beneath the waves, with only your breath and your wonder, you're part of that story now. Good night, and may the lost paths always rise beneath your feet.